I feel like we're at a rave every Sunday.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
So awesome. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sunday show. This is the first of two Sunday shows. There are no other shows on Sunday, so you can just like tune into this one. And then when it's done, get yourself something to eat and come back for the Sunday show after dark, which will be happening at 7 p.m. Central. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, John Gleason. How the hell are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Just, surviving this hellish landscape that we find ourselves in this past week. It's been an interesting week for fucking around and finding out, though. So, that's
Yes.
all that kind of news has been entertaining.
And the thing is, I get the feeling that it's maybe those of us who are more left-leaning, who are being fed by the algorithm, the Trump supporters who are waking up to, oh my gosh, he did this. I didn't think that was going to happen, or this isn't what I vote. We're seeing that. The Trump supporters aren't getting fed that stuff by their algorithm. So they're just still in party mode of, let me fill another cup with liberal tears.
Yeah,
but
my favorite one this week though has been the VA positions that were in the process of like being hired in, because it was a really weird situation. They got the jobs, right? It was like 300,000 some odd people that were getting jobs come in, and then they get letters saying, oh, because of Trump's new executive order, we're having to rescind this job offer, so you can no longer do it. And there were people that had spent thousands of dollars like relocating and everything like that, and they were Trump supporters. And so then because Biden's current VA secretary pick is still, leading the VA, and he saved their jobs by exempting them. But the incoming VA secretary that Trump has picked said, well, I'm going to abide by the EO. So basically, Trump's pick would have continued to fuck them over, while Biden's pick was like, I'm saving jobs. And so that's like the biggest, that's the weirdest thing as far as the fuck around and find out thing for me this week, amongst a lot of other weird things.
There's an interesting article. So by the way, Trump has now, through executive order, declared that there are only two sexes, and they are assigned at conception, and they're immutable. And they defined female as a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the large reproductive cells, and male means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the small reproductive cells. So we're really digging down into a very narrow biological essentialism thing, to where, when you see someone on the street, or you see someone in the restroom, you have no idea if they're male or female, because you don't know what their reproductive cells are or were at the time of conception. But there's a concern that what ends up being listed as phenotypically female at conception would make all of us women. And so their definition is so sloppy that Trump is probably the first woman president. So congratulations, Madam President. But this is the Sunday show, and we have plenty of time on other shows to talk about politics and stuff like that. We'll dig in more on those. I'm here today with John at the Sunday show after dark. It's going to be Forrest and Seth's show later on this evening. You can tune back in for that. Skeptalk tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central is Dr. Aaron Adair and Erica Gibbon. And Tuesdays, Chewed Gum is going to be Alyssa and Eve. And I will be back on Wednesday night for the Hang Up with Eve as well. And then Thursday's Transatlantic Collins show, Arden's going to be on that. And I'm not sure, there may be a special guest. There may not. Who knows? I don't know. Don't want to say anything. Don't want to jinx anything, even though jinxes are bullshit like everything else. But it's a Sunday show. So on the Sunday show, for those who aren't aware, we'd like for people who believe in gods, who believe in supernatural things, who have a religion, whether it's because they're convinced it's true or because they think it's just beneficial, Did you go to church today? Do you normally go to church? Why do you go to church? What benefit do you get out of it? Is this all tied to truth, and do you care about truth? Can you demonstrate it? Or is this about making you feel good? So in the midst of all of this, you can call in and explain what you believe and why. And if you think that we should also believe for your reason. So if you're like, hey, I believe in God because God spoke to me, obviously that's not going to, be convincing to us or anybody else, because God hasn't spoken to us. But yes, I called her Eve because that's how it's listed. It's also Promise. Trust me, I know her name. But if you have good reasons to believe, and more importantly, good reasons why you think we should perhaps believe, lines are open. Get your calls in. If you've sat through your church service and you are just coming down for your after church service dinner excursion, we're ready to go there. And while we wait for these for the calls to queue up, we had a call. That person ran away. I'm not quite sure what happened. But while we wait for those calls, John, when I think it might be good when you talk to people who are advocating for religion, there's a number of different roads we can go down, which is, hey, do you have some kind of solid evidence-based argument? Or is it more a philosophical argument? When you engage with people outside of the shows, I mean, the shows are going to be weird because we're going to get people who are trying to present what they think should convince people. But in other conversations from yourself, your family, and others, what do you see as, or what is your impression that the most compelling reason is for someone's God belief, if they're able to give one at all?
I mean, compelling to me or compelling to them?
To them. I mean, they're
To
when they're
them?
like, hey, seriously, whether they realize it or not, this is the reason that they're like, yes,
Mhm.
I'm convinced.
Well, I mean, honestly, it seems it comes across to me at least that they just can't fathom another explanation better than God, and then they also rely on like personal experience and everything. Like, I've personally experienced God, or God has done this for me, or I was this way before I believed in God, and now I'm this way, and so that must mean that God exists and Jesus is the real God and all this other stuff. So it's all very sort of a personal experience sort of thing. It seems like an evidential reason is always secondary to it. It's like they'll always bring up like I've got my personal experience. That's the thing they first always say to me, but then they go into like things that they think will convince me, like some kind of evidence thing, like, oh, but the Gospels are eyewitnesses. You don't want to have that conversation with me, there, buddy.
It yeah is yeah it definitely. I mean, we like when I was in church. I for those who we'll talk a little bit about our church experience, because I mean that's the primer in the show title today, which is "Do you go to church? Why?" When I went from basically from before I was born. Matt just said he went before he was born. Yes, because towards the end of a pregnancy, it's not functionally different. It's just a matter of geography, whether I'm inside the womb or outside. But it was just to show that my family was in church all the ding dong time. And as a kid, I was only there on Sunday mornings with my folks as a small child, and sometimes without my folks. Like there was a church bus that would come pick us up. And I remember the church bus would go through the drive-through at McDonald's and get everybody a cheeseburger, because you could buy, 30, 40 cheeseburgers for, I don't know, $5 or $10. And whoever was funding the church bus thing was like, let's give them all treats. And you'd sing songs on the church bus, Father Abraham and sons, and all kinds of stuff. But when I got to be closer to a teenager, I was going to church much more often and on my own and voluntarily. I was there Sunday morning, Sunday night. Monday night was visitation. So when you went to church and you filled out one of those little visitor cards and dropped it in the offering plate, on Monday, we would get together in small groups and pick those up and then go to the various homes, because it's much better to just not go knocking on random doors, but go to the people who've expressed an interest, who are saying, hey, I live here, I'm new to the area, or I visited a church, I'd like to talk more. And then you go and interact with them. And then I forget what Tuesday night was, but Wednesday night was a regular, midweek service. And there was youth group stuff on uh, Thursdays, and then Fridays and weekends and mission trips and things like that. But I went because my friends were there, because I genuinely believed. But, I got saved at the age of 5, walking down an aisle at a revival. And so this was just the de facto part of my life. And I never thought about reasons. It was just, I was so steeped in it from birth. It was just a matter of fact. I don't remember the last time that I was in church as a believer at all. But I have been to, when's the last time you were in a church?
Oh, this is kind of embarrassing. I guess the last time, actually, it's not too embarrassing. The last time I was actually in a church was I did an in-person debate with a Canadian intelligent design proponent. And so I was doing an in person, that my first in-person debate, and it was at a church here locally in North Alabama. Prior to that, though, embarrassingly, it was to go and listen to Greg Locke before he turned like insanely crazy,
Oh, wow.
So like there was a point in time when he was not as crazy as he is now. He was still like very firebrandy sort of, church preacher, but like he wasn't all conspiratorial and like political and all this other stuff. Like that happened later. But yeah, it was I had went to a church that he was speaking at, and I listened to him speak and everything, and it was interesting. Had to
How
drive
did
all
that
the way
come
out to the
about?
boonies for that.
How did that come about? Were you looking to like get information to respond to? How did you even know about Greg Locke before he went nuts?
Well, so I had done a number of responses to Greg Locke, like on YouTube and everything like that. And I had interacted on his Facebook page. And so like it got to the point where I was kind of like on messaging basis with Greg Locke. And
Mm.
so when he happened to have like a speaking thing coming through Alabama, he had messaged me and said, hey, I'm doing this thing through Alabama if you want to come and talk or whatnot to me or whatever. And so I was like, sure, why not? It was like both Casey and I were like, it's an adventure. And so
Yay.
we went and we listened, you know?
It's I the last time I was in a church, technically, I don't really count this, but I mean I should. I was in a church to do a debate, and that was Good Friday, Easter weekend of this past year, and that was the debate that Than and I did. Hi Than, if you see this, still want to hang out and do some like debate review stuff. But prior to that, I was thinking, for my, not for you necessarily, but for my perspective, is when was the last time I was even close to being a believer in church? Because when I was a teenager, all the way up until I went in the Navy, obviously I was still a believer. Then short after I went in the Navy, there was a period of time where I would occasionally go to church, but I was a believer, but not in the same way that I was before. And then in the at some there was this huge gap. And then there was a period of time in the early days of when I was first working on the atheist experience. I would go to church, one of the mega churches around, or one of the small churches around where I lived, on Sunday morning as a visitor, just to listen to the sermon and take notes on because I knew I was no longer a believer, and I knew I was starting to do the shows. I didn't ever want to put up straw man versions of Christianity. I didn't want to be saying, oh, they're preaching this in the pulpit if they're not. And so I went to just made sure I kind of kept a connection to that past of mine. And so that if I heard something in the sermon, I can be like, I was at church this morning and the pastor says this. What does your pastor say? What do you think about this? Is this a, correct interpretation? And it was fun doing it, but I'm just, for those of you who are out there who are in church regularly, why? Um, what are you getting out of it? And, how many of you are out there going as a matter of habit and not a matter of devotion or genuine interest? I don't, it's interesting stuff. We've got an atheist on the line. Troy's calling in from Oregon, pronounce it him, has a question about evidential epistemology. So how you doing, Troy? You're on with John and Matt.
Hey guys, hope you're having a good day today. Lovely Sunday here in beautiful Portland, Oregon. Although I think they're starting to have riots again now that Trump is president. They're starting a little fear campaign that our whole downtown is going to blow up again. So anyway, got a question for you guys. And it has to do with bombastic apologetic evidential epistemology. So sometimes when I'm having conversations, I hear these over-the-top, preposterous, offerings of evidence, 300 prophecies, thousands of manuscript evidence. Any thoughts about how to approach that? I just hear, crazy over-the-top stuff that it's hard to refute in one quick meme or sentence or little bumper sticker. You have to talk for hours about that stuff.
Okay.
If you got like an example,
just yeah, well, like Canictal or whatever, he'll do his street epistemology and he'll say, nothing's been more attested to than the resurrection, and he'll cite thousands of documents that are from antiquity, and everybody believes it, and there's over 300 prophecies fulfilled. That's so many more than zero.
Okay, so what I'm hearing are two claims. One is that the thousands of manuscripts or copies of the Gospels somehow indicate some kind of truth behind the Gospels. Would you say that that's correct?
Yeah, true. And then the same thing with these so-called fulfilled prophecies. But when
Right.
they're presented by apologists completely dishonestly, they're just way over the top. Like how are you supposed to like there's zero.
Right.
There's zero.
I
mean,
Right. I understand your frustration. The thousands of manuscripts thing, that has no bearing on whether or not the Gospels are true. The Gospels, of course, have a lot of copies, but that's because Christianity was a major religion for thousands of years, and even up to this present day, it's a major religion. So obviously, there's going to be thousands of copies. Just because there's like thousands and millions of Bibles in the world now doesn't mean that anything in the Bible is accurate or correct. I mean, I would just say I would say that that's a sort of a non sequitur. That just because that there are a lot of copies does not mean that the information's true. What you're looking at as far as like historical documents go, you're going to look at source criticism, and that would be where did they get their information from, and then how many independent documents do you have? And with the Gospels, honestly, you've got Mark, and then the rest of the Gospels are dependent upon Mark's gospel. So you really just have Mark's gospel. And so just because there are a lot of copies of Mark's gospel and different variations of Mark's gospel doesn't mean that the information that Mark is reporting is accurate and correct. So, I mean, that's not a meme or like a one word refutation of it. But I mean, that's right. How I would probably go about discussing it with somebody. Now, as far as the fulfilled prophecies go, my first problem with prophecies is that prophecies are magical. And there's never been a prophecy, like an actual prophecy in the past that's been specific enough to where the only explanation for why that prophecy came true is that the person actually had foreknowledge, that magically had foreknowledge. There's never been an instance of that. And so considering that, all of the prophecies are either going to be super generalized where you can apply it to anybody. Think of Nostradamus, that it can apply to almost anybody, any situation. And so therefore it's always coming true because it's so generalized. The other thing is that they take these previous statements and they turn them into prophecies. And all of this is used to validate some kind of fact or idea that they want to be true about Jesus. And so like with the gospel authors, what they did was they took the Old Testament right? And they turned certain verses into prophecies, and they took other actual prophecies, and they created stories so that Jesus would fulfill those. That's actually a much more likely situation than the prophecies originally being prophecies and actually coming to fulfillment without any kind of like knowledge about what would with foreknowledge about what would happen in the future, like God supposedly wrote these prophecies down or gave these prophecies to somebody. So it's more likely that the authors knew about these verses, turned them into prophecies, and then purposefully wrote Jesus as fulfilling them. And so that would be how I would do it. I don't know. I don't mean to monopolize the time there.
No,
Matt.
no, I really appreciate your thoughts, and that makes so much sense because when you think about what an apologist is trying to accomplish, that is not a quick little bumper sticker or soundbite. You actually have to go into great detail and nuance and discuss it. But the frustration that I feel is that there's this over-the-top, go big dishonesty. Because, like, I totally agree with what you're saying, but that is just not an easy thing to get out all at once.
One of the first questions that I recommend you ask anytime they cite, there's two questions to ask anytime somebody cites something. Is it true? And what does that demonstrate? The number of copies of manuscripts, is it true? Okay, it could be true. What does that demonstrate? It doesn't tell you anything at all about whether or not it's true. It doesn't tell you anything at all about whether or not the number of copies that we have are reasonably accurate to the originals, reasonably accurate to author's intent. How much have they been altered? How much were they altered before we had good records? Do we have any autographed copies? And if we did, would it make any difference? And so when they start citing the number of manuscripts, it's like saying, it's essentially an argumentum ad populum. It's an argument to popularity, and not in the broad sense of the public believes this, but we have a plurality, we have a multitude of these things, and that demonstrates their reliability. Now, that demonstrates that they were popular and that people reliably copied them, or somewhat reliably copied them. But whether or not, I can sit here and pay somebody to print a billion copies of the Erantia document. It doesn't tell you anything at all about what it says, what it means, or whether or not any of it's in there is true. And so those are the first things that pop through my head when somebody makes an argument is, do I have reason to believe it's true? Obviously, I also start with, is the argument valid in structure? But do I have reason to accept the premises? And if I did, what does that change? Because I can easily believe that there are things that people see as prophecy coming true, and that wouldn't mean that it is, or tell you how it happened. And I can easily believe that we have more copies of certain manuscripts from the Bible or versions of manuscripts, and it wouldn't tell me anything at all about whether that's true. So those are my first questions every time.
Oh, that's great. Now, guys, I appreciate your help. Thanks for that very thoughtful response. It means a lot going forward.
Yeah, no worries. If you got anything else for us, Troy, if not, we're going to move on.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You too. All right. So that's Troy. Troy's an atheist with a question. If you're an atheist with a question, there's some open lines you can call in and see what we think, or correct where we're wrong, or expand some stuff. We will always move theists to the top of the queue when they call in, but we're also here to, to some extent, serve the atheist community and hopefully broaden it. So if you've got questions or whatever, feel free to call in. I know it's a lazy Sunday, Tuesday, and we're building up. We're going to get flooded with calls probably in about 30 minutes here. So it's a good opportunity for atheists to call in now to get early questions out of the way, so you don't end up sitting on hold for 2 hours and then still not get through. But
yeah, definitely. Because as soon as the theists start pouring in, we just probably won't, or at least I won't be able to get to any atheist callers.
Yeah, and by the way, it's 2:20. It's 2:25 right now. John's got a hard stop at 4:00, but I'm going to keep going, provided we have callers. We may or may not get somebody else to jump in as well. But if you've got specific questions for John, you can call and get those locked in. In the meantime, while we wait for more calls to come in and get screened, back to kind of what we were discussing as a sideline. I don't remember exactly what it was that convinced me when I was a 5-year-old, other than, maybe it was just social pressure of, ooh, people are walking down to the front. Ooh, my folks love Jesus. I should love Jesus. It could have been that simple. And what I found interesting is much later, my mom and I had a discussion because my mom said some things that obviously, how are you going to challenge your mom's memory of something that happened when you were 5? Because I don't remember hardly anything from when I was 5. Like, I'll have vague images, which might only be present because of photographs. Memory is a funny thing. We manufacture and we alter memories. And what I remember about being 5 is next to nothing. And it may all come from pictures and stories. I may not have any strong memory at all from when I was 5. But my mom said when she found out I was an atheist, it was answered prayer, because she had been asking God, what's wrong with my son? And the day that I told her I was an atheist, or when she found out I was an atheist, that's when God answered her prayer. So my mom's sitting here thinking, there's something wrong with my son. What is it? And she keeps asking God and asking God and asking God. And then finally, she finds out I'm an atheist, and that's God telling her what's wrong with me. But then she expresses something she had never said in my entire life. Now, my mom was convinced that God wanted me to be a preacher. My mom was convinced that God told her that I was going to be a preacher. And I remember that because we were in a conversation in the car, all 4 of us, mom, dad, me, and Brad, were in the car. And I said, I want to be a DJ when I grow up. And my mom's like, no, honey, God already told me what you're going to be. And my dad turned and looked at her and glared as if, you ain't supposed to say that. That could ruin it. That's a secret. But evidently they had both received like this word from God. And then when I walked down earlier, when I'd walked down the aisle at the age of 5 at that revival, evidently mom and dad had gone to the preacher and said, hey, can this be real? Can a 5-year-old actually know and understand this stuff well enough to be saved? And the preacher's answer, to his credit, and this would be Brother Moody, was, we have no way of knowing. You just have to trust God and keep going to church. And, if it's real, you'll know. And, you may never know, because only God knows who's actually saved, but, you'll spot differences. And I had in my teenage years this same concern. Like when I was 12 or 13 and I'm going to church camp and they're playing the psychologically, emotionally addictive games to make you realize, oh, you didn't know what any of this was, and you're in need of, you're in need of Jesus. I had a panic moment, because from the age of 5 to 12 or 13, I just knew I was saved. I knew I was going to heaven. I knew Jesus was in my heart. I just knew it. And then when I got to 13, I started to understand things better. And it became, hang on, if I didn't understand any of this when I was 5, have I not been saved this entire time? I better get saved today. So I did it again. And then because I was a Southern Baptist, I did it again and again and again and again, but it was mostly like a rededicating of my life to Christ. I was saved the whole time, but I was backslidden and fallen, the language. But it was, the conversation with my mom of, oh, we weren't sure if it was for real, and now we know. And I was like, yeah, but you didn't know when I was 13 and more active in church than you, when I was 14 and more active in the church. It's wild, the messages that God decides to give, evidently, and doesn't give on other occasions. But all right, rather than telling more of my life story, let's get to some calls, because that's always more fun. Michael's calling from Oklahoma. Pronouns are he, him. Something about the, ooh, wow, there's some, are you driving down a road with your phone hanging out the window?
No, I'm standing motionless in my kitchen.
It sounds like you're in a well. I can barely understand anything, and there's wind.
Okay, let me readjust.
Oh my God. Here, I'm going to put you back in the queue and you can readjust and we'll get back to you in a minute because that's painful audio. John is it Minnesota? He, they. You are on the air. Might that have confused John thinking we were going to Michael? Here, I'll put John back in the queue and we'll try this again. Maybe Michael has now adjusted his audio so that we can hear Michael. You're back on the air, Michael?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's like night and fucking day.
Okay, great. Okay, I've just noticed over the years, as y'all excoriate theists over their mistaken ideas, there's a small/large mistake y'all have made in talking about the beginning of Genesis. In particular, now, I can't nail down exactly who said this. I know Boris Valkaya said it. I think you have, Matt, and some others. But when a theist is talking about the infallibility of the Bible, you say, well, let's start at the beginning. And you say, let there be light. And then there's a big horse laugh because how can there be light without stars? Am I correct so far? Hello?
I don't know what you think we've said or what we've said. I'm not going to remember. Just go ahead and go with the point.
Well, I've heard Forrest say this specifically, that there can't be light without stars.
Excuse me. Forrest isn't here. It doesn't matter
who
said it. It doesn't matter who said it. Just get to the point.
Well, the point is that there can be light without stars. And so y'all are incorrect on that. Maybe it's a picky point. I don't know. But the cosmic microwave background is made of photons. The cosmic microwave background is made of photons.
Yeah,
and there were no stars when the cosmic microwave background came to be.
Never mind, Michael. I don't care. Go ahead, John.
Well, it's the cosmic microwave background radiation is radiation, which light would be a form of radiation. But I mean, that's
what's it made of.
I don't know what you mean by it's made of photons.
It is. Photons are the force-carrying particles of the electromagnetic spectrum, and the cosmic microwave background is on the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, what you are correct, but really the first thing it says is wrong, because it says the face of God moved across the waters, I think, something like that. And there can't be water without stars.
It's not the first thing it says, but okay.
Well, it's close. I mean, it's like the second verse or something.
Oh, wait. So it's okay for you to be close, but you're going to nitpick about whether or not the cosmic microwave background radiation.
Well, I'm just saying that stars that they can be light without stars.
Why the fuck are you talking while in the middle of my fucking sentence?
Because I'm out of control.
Okay, now you're gone. Bye, Michael.
Fare thee well.
Fare thee well.
See, this is the sort of ridiculous nitpicking that isn't remotely relevant, because whatever the facts are about cosmic microwave background radiation, it's irrelevant to what's in the Bible. And it's also irrelevant to whether or not there was something that might count as light, because what the Bible's describing as light in verse 3 is a Hebrew word that existed with no possible conception of photons or cosmic microwave background radiation, and at that moment there wasn't anything there to experience it. The Genesis order is God created the heavens and the earth. Now that's a general statement, but it's starting with the earth. And the problem is that the earth did not exist before the sun. And the earth did not exist before there was light. So whether the microwave background radiation was light or not is irrelevant, because the biblical order is God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the earth, because God hadn't created light yet. So whatever is the heavens didn't include light and can't be cosmic microwave background radiation, according to the Bible. And the Spirit of the God moved upon the face of the waters. That's the end of the second verse. I don't know why it's okay for you to play fast and loose with what was first and what was not, and then challenge background radiation. Then verse 3, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. There was no point in the universe at which the earth existed before light. I would like to think that we could at least agree on that. But it's very clear from verses 3 and 4 that what God's creating here is not a light, but light in the conceptual sense, because the existence of light is then separated from darkness in verse 4. So I don't know what the value is in trying to go through and make sure that the Bible might align with science. But if we said there can't be light before stars, and in fact there can be, congratulations, we were wrong.
Yeah, I was just going to correct myself because I'd never heard of it. I never heard it formed in the way that, the cosmic microwave background radiation is primarily made of photons. And at first I was like, wait, no, it's radiation, but photons are radiation. So I was like, wait, can that be right? And so I did look it up, and it's primarily composed of photons, but that's like Matt was saying, like, that's not what the first line of Genesis is talking about. And if anybody were to laugh at, let there be light, as like the first step in the creation process, that's obviously not what science tells us, like, about the early universe, because, like, after the initial near instantaneous expansion of the universe, the universe was too hot and dense for photons to travel through it. It had to cool down enough in order for photons to travel. And I feel like if Forrest or anybody else were to laugh at the very first line because there's no stars able out there to produce light, you do need something that's, generating those protons and sending them out and everything like that. So, I mean, I feel like it's pulling the nut hairs off of a fly to have a problem with it.
Yeah. And, it's fine. If your only point was, ooh, you guys made a mistake because you said there can't be light without stars, and actually there would be light because CMBR is constructed of photons. Okay, cool. If there was only the CMBR, there would not be sufficient sufficient light for life on Earth. And what the Bible specifically says is that let there be light, and there was light, and God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day. So now what the Bible's saying is that the light is day, and that doesn't exist without an earth spinning on an axis and a sun, because that's what day is. And so in the minds of the ancient people, light was day, not even just, it was boom. That's what, we're talking about as kind of concept. Anyway, we dug into a little bitty hole there. If anybody said that there can't be light without stars, they were wrong. Congratulations. I will exercise more caution so that I don't make that mistake again, just so I never have to have a pedantic call like that again. John's calling in from, I think it's Minnesota, prone to he, they. Hey, John, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can now. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I think I might have been muted on my end. I didn't realize it before.
Yeah, we're all good. What's up?
Okay, yeah, anyway, Matt, I've been following your stuff for a bit. And usually I watch your channel and your content on one screen while I play Minecraft on the other. Excellent for that. Anyway, I just, now that I have this opportunity, I wanted to ask you, what made you decide that this path in particular for you, like personally, was the right path? Like devoting your life to elucidating the uh, I don't know, misunderstandings, inaccuracies is probably better to say, in the Bible and other types of organized written religion.
I have no idea.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know why I like chocolate ice cream and why I didn't used to like chocolate ice cream. I have no idea why I like the things I like or why I do the things I do. It may all be rationalizations, but I can tell you that while I'm not necessarily sure how any of it works out, the experience was I found out that despite being a reasonably intelligent dude, I had been misled and misinformed and did not properly have the tool set to evaluate the religious claims and address them. And when I did, because I had also been in a position where I was telling people that my religious beliefs were true, I felt like an obligation to like correct the misinformation. Like, oh, here, this was a misprint type of thing. That's a good chunk of kind of what I was thinking and feeling when I got started
Okay.
with this. But now it's like I don't know how to stop, and it's important,
Mhm.
and I love doing it. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I,
I mean, yeah.
I know you didn't ask me.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to give it
No,
to
that's
John to
okay.
answer too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know it wasn't primarily about me, but for me, I grew up in a culture and in a family that just automatically believed and told me that I should automatically believe. So it's just kind of like, this is a fact of reality. And so you just need to trust us and all this other stuff. And so I did, and I had no reason to doubt anything. And then once I did start thinking about things and doubting things, like I came to my own conclusions about stuff. And so I kind of sort of made a promise to myself that I was not going to like be that way again, like to where, I'm sort of shutting up, sitting in the corner, listening and believing and not questioning, what I'm being told. And so like that's kind of been my motivation for continuing, because I've been doing this since 2011, 2012. The atheist activism kind of thing, pushing back against religion. I've committed to myself that I'm not going to just sit back and just listen, believe, and just allow people to say wrong things all the time or convince other people of wrong things. And so it was just kind of sort of a thing that I promised that I wasn't going to fall back into. And so that's just kind of become part of my own character now. Like instead of stifling my character, I just sort of let it shine. Like I just let it out. So just from my own personal experience, that's where I come from with it.
John's decided to not hide his light under a bushel. He's going to let it shine, just like we used to sing on the bus to church. The light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Anyway, I apologize that there was no grand epiphany, and there was no, this needs to be the purpose or mission of my life. What happened is I got involved, and I started seeing actual benefits of it and enjoying the conversations. And there were other people who found their way out, in part because of things I said or because of the other things other people in the community have said. And not only do I not know how to not do this, I don't want to not do it. Like doing the shows and the debates. By the way, I'm getting ready to go on tour with more debates and things this year. I'll have some announcements in the coming weeks. Possibly a debate discussion type thing with Frank Turek may be among the first things that I do. But it's
interesting.
I care. It's like, what is your favorite hobby, John?
Oh, I have, well, I'm a musician.
There you go.
I don't want to step out of line and tell you what my band is or whatever, but I have music online. I don't know what's appropriate for this show is my point.
I don't mind either way, but why do you like making music?
Because it's like you said, it's just what I like to do. It seems to be the
Yeah.
thing I like most, at least right now.
Yep.
And also, it's not limited to music. I'm just very interested in being creative and constructing my own little fantasy worlds and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I have
And
loads
by
of
the way,
hobbies. I have tons
Sure,
of
yeah.
hobbies, and some of them I don't participate in as much as I used to. Like I am a good magician. I'm not just, lucky to work with James Randi, but also Sean Farquhar and others as well. At least doing shows. I'm not, world beater, but I love it. I absolutely love everything about magic and minimalism and stuff like that. But I don't have much
I
time to
love it
work
too,
on
by
it.
the way.
I think. I mean, good. I'm glad. I learned to play guitar while I was in the Navy, but only I'm just kind of a cowboy chord, rhythm guitarist. I don't really do any lead stuff. And the diabetic neuropathy's made it so that I can't really play at all anymore. But I still love it. And Arden will tell you, I end up watching a lot of music content, even though I probably haven't touched any of my guitars in at least 6 months. But I'll still watch,
Yeah, I'm
whatever Rick
literally I'm the
Beato puts
same,
out.
actually.
So, but yeah,
Sorry.
it's all good. So I do this for along the same reason. Same reason people, Arden and I run on Epic Loot Exotics, which we keep and breed reptiles. And people are like, ooh, why did you keep and breed reptiles? And I'm like, I don't know. I met this person I love. We both had an interest in it. And we said, you want to do this? And we said yes. And then we started doing it. And why would you stop? At some point, we may stop or we may have to stop, just like I don't play. Hang on. Sorry, there was something in chat that I found incredibly disturbing. But anyway, John, I hope that's a
Oh,
good enough answer for you.
yeah, chat is unfortunately very full of that, but it's also full of wonderful people. And
Yeah.
usually I've found that usually people are kind online. It's just those, nasty, loudest crap that is the most obvious. Anyway, that's
Yep.
neither here nor there. What I did want to say in response to the answer to my original question was that thank you very much. That definitely gives a lot of meaningful context to me, because I was thinking, like, to elucidate what my assumptions were. I was thinking at some point you decided, okay, yes, it's time to make a career out of tearing down religion or whatever. When in reality, what I'm hearing is like you're just following the things that you want to do, and you're not necessarily limiting yourself to any one thing. Do you think that's accurate?
Well, yeah. I can tell you how this became my job.
Okay.
I started doing it because it was important. For the entire time that I was on the Atheist Experience, I was a volunteer and not paid. Nobody's allowed to be paid. I've never been paid by the Atheist Experience. Matter of fact, I used my life savings to help promote that stuff and to go do events even for free. And I burned through all my vacation time at my regular job. My personal YouTube channel wasn't monetized, and I never made a penny off of it until 2.5, 3 weeks ago, when I got my first ever check from YouTube directly. Now I do get paid through the line. So technically I've made money from the line for what the line makes on YouTube. But for my own channel, despite the fact that it has like 198,000 subscribers, I got to nearly 200,000 subscribers without it being, monetized, without me making any money off of it. And I had that in my view. I didn't want to monetize it because I didn't want people doing oh, Matt's just in it for clicks and money. But you know what happens? I literally got a parade of emails all the time with Matt's just in it for clicks and money. And I was like, fuck it. If they're going to think it, I might as well get some money out of it. So I went ahead and monetized it.
Okay.
But the other thing was,
Sure.
I had already been doing all these shows and occasionally going out to do events and debates and stuff, but it didn't pay a ton. And then I lost my job. Right after we bought this house, I lost my job. Like,
oh man,
within 2 months of closing in this house. And
you waited for just the worst moment, huh?
Yeah. Well, it could have happened right before we closed on the house, in which case I wouldn't have a house. At least this way we got in. But Aaron and his wife came down to visit us, and they were there for their anniversary. And he had just started his Patreon, and he was like, "Oh, you should do this because you can make money this way." And so I did it, and the Patreon took off. And while I'm never going to get rich, it covers the bills. It covered my house and regular bills. It didn't cover my health insurance at all. But now with the line added to it, yeah, I got health insurance again, although it's costing me $1,000 a month. So anyway, that's how I got to be doing this, like, for a job.
Wow. Yeah.
But we really spent way too much time on me and my life today. So I kind of got to move on.
Oh yeah, I'm
John.
sorry.
No
Yeah,
worries.
no, absolutely. Just the other thing I wanted to make sure that the other John over there knows is that I didn't mean to come off as if I was purposefully ignoring you or just focusing on one half. It's just that Matt, I know very well, and your material, John Gleason, I am frankly just not familiar with at all. And this was a good opportunity for me to selfishly speak with Matt. So I'm sorry.
No. You're fine. I didn't take it that way at all. I felt more like, you know, I was inserting, you know, something that wasn't asked of me. So I kind of felt like I was butting in, but that's fine. I don't expect people to know me.
And can I please just say one more thing that I think is relevant?
Sure. Yeah.
I want to say the other reason personally I wanted to ask, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity, is I'm 28 years old right now. I'm unemployed, and it's funny what you're talking about with, like, you just making what you were doing work, and just figuring out where the money is, just finding money. That's kind of how I did my release my second album. Is I got unemployed there, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to do what I want to do, and it's going to get done. And I did it. But now I'm in a space where I'm like, okay, but I need to kind of be more intentional. And you guys all on the line all inspire me. Matt, especially you inspire me. And thank you for answering my question and giving a lot of context to your career path, because it does give a lot of inspiration and context to mine, maybe.
Awesome. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate the call, but we got to move on and just
absolutely. Thank you.
Don't give up. I actually had a kind of an interesting moment yesterday. I don't know why this been in my mind. It has nothing to do with the shows or anything else. And Arden's probably going to roll her eyes, but I have an ex who was an amazing singer, like should have been on like America's Got Talent or some show like that, or should have a record deal. And we were listening to some music and it reminded me of her, and I haven't talked to her in years. And I was like, I kind of want to send her a text message, because, you know, when people get a message, it's like, hey, I don't need anything from you. I don't want anything from you, and I don't know what's going on in your life, but, you know, I just felt like sending out something encouraging, like, you know, especially, you know, with the Trump and everything else, it can really significantly cause people to not seek their dreams. And at 55 now, I'm able to do the things that I like to do with respect to the job and survive. And it's because of the people who support us here at The Line. So a huge thank you. You can go to patreon.com/calltheline. You can go to patreon.com/atheist debates for mine. You can become a channel member here. You can go to linemerch.com and support us that way. But the best way you can support us is to watch and participate. Click on, you know, the links that are down here and encourage other people to not only watch, but call in. If you're having difficulty having an argument and a discussion with a theist, let them know there's a place they can call in. Because while we've got other callers here, we still do not have a theist caller here. And I'm wondering, you know, John, if we haven't just scared them all off.
I mean, I think so. I think that they're just too scared to pop on with us and have their beliefs questioned. Like, I feel like that's a win on our end, honestly.
Yep. I will keep saying we won the atheist or the religious debate portion of the internet. We are now the winners. I'm figuring if we can get my channel to 200,000 subscribers and get the line to 200,000 subscribers, because the line's at 153,000 right now. And a huge thank you to everybody. If we can get both those channels to 200,000, I think we should just declare victory. Because when you look at the subscribers that we've got on other channels and, you know, other programs we've done, I think it was just one. That's it.
No, I totally think that's it. I mean, that's got to be it. Even though Justin Brierly did do a video where he says that atheism is dead, but I feel like that's just projection.
All right, let's get a couple more callers here. We got a couple more atheists here with some questions. Jacelyn from Tennessee is calling. Pronouns are she, her. I hope I pronounced that correctly. How are you today, Jacelyn?
It is Jacelyn. I've talked to you before. Love you guys. Love you, John. I got a little nervous whenever I typed out my topic, but I overthought it. But I'm just really wondering what you guys run these shows, and like I know a couple of other people around my area that have run these shows and stuff, and you guys live atheism all day, every day, like not necessarily aggressively, but I think there's a sect of us out there that like listening to the show that really get to live as atheists and doesn't have to have it be their forefront in life.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you guys, is there a disconnect there that y'all have to deal with, or is there one day where you'd love to just be, I'm an atheist and now I can just live it. The world's close to being perfect. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't do that. Because the world's nowhere near close to being perfect. And because I see I couldn't just, I have friends who I love and respect, who are atheists, who absolutely do nothing in at all involved with talking about atheism or religion or whatever else. They're not activists. They're not content creators. They do not go to atheist conventions. They are not politically involved or even politically discussing things related to religion. But I'm in a position where I see the harm that religion's doing to people and the harm that religions and people on behalf of their religions are doing to the world. And like I said to the other caller, I don't know how to not talk about that, and I wouldn't want to. Now, would I like to eventually get to a point where, I just get to hang out with Arden and my reptiles and, have fun with that type of stuff? Yes, but I can't do that as long as things are as fucked up as they are. John, where are you at?
I mean, so I one of my main hobbies, I guess I would call it, is my atheist activism. My primary job during the day is software engineer. I work on helicopter planning software. So I mean, like I have a lot of facets to my life. I play poker now. Like I started playing poker last year, and I'm really starting to get pretty decent at it. So I'm trying to get better at that. So I've been really focusing on like playing a lot of poker here lately. So I guess my entire point is that it's not my entire identity, or it doesn't consume every facet, but I will say that a good chunk of my time is devoted to my primary hobby, which is being an atheist activist. But that's because of the fact that Christian nationalism and religion in general has steadily throughout the years become more and more relevant to just everyday life. So it's kind of hard to be an atheist, at least for me. I'm not talking about anybody else. It's hard for me to be an atheist, see what's going on in our socio-political environment right now, and not say something and not do something. I think that if I saw myself in a position where I could help somebody or be a voice that somebody needs to hear, and I don't fulfill that, then I would feel bad about myself. And so like that's kind of what motivates me. So I don't see it as taking up a lot of my time, because this is just the environment that I exist in. And it's not a way for me to like shame anybody out there that doesn't partake in like the socio-political topics that are currently kind of like on blast right now. But I'm just saying, as far as my motivation goes, it's kind of like, it's not too overbearing, and it's not like a job for me to do something that I love doing. And that's what atheist activism is for me.
Jason, you still there? Oh, I bet you're muted. If you're on your phone on the web client, you have to tap your phone to wake it up and then tap the browser to wake that up, and then you can talk again.
And type my passcode in. Okay, yeah, you fell asleep.
Yep, you're back.
Okay, yeah, I'm just really proud of. I'm proud that we have this community, that y'all started this community to do this, and like have us. Some of us listeners are. You've changed our lives, and I love it. And because of you, I became, or atheism, or listening to these shows and seeing the truth. I've gotten sober, and
Awesome.
found a new path of life that makes sense. And I think
That's
atheists
outstanding.
have that opportunity for their path in life too. You know, we can. It's not that bad out there.
That is absolutely outstanding. Thank you for sharing, because one of the things we're likely to hear is that, I couldn't have got sober without Jesus. And while there may be some people who wouldn't have been able to seek sobriety without the Jesus concept, that's independent of whether or not Jesus had anything to do with it. So I have a number of problems with 12-step programs, because I think there are potentially better ways.
Oh, I understand.
But the kind of Dumbo's magic feather, as much as we might object to it from a standpoint of skepticism and what's true, if you are still convinced that the only way you can fly is with Dumbo's magic feather, even if the feather's not involved, and if flying is an important thing, then okay, I hope it continues. But and I'm not talking to you, Jason. I get it. But I'm glad it's been useful. Thanks so much.
Well, yeah. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest. Love you guys. Keep having a good show.
Will do. We've got some theist callers lined up if you're ready, John. It took a little bit, but
I'm
as
so
expected.
ready.
Yep. An hour into the show with an hour left for John. We have Joe calling from Kansas. Joe's a theist, pronouns are he, him, and Joe, you're on the web client, so you may need to tap your phone if you're on your phone and the everything to wake back up. But the quote here says standards of evidence that are too high to be met. So I guess we're gonna have a talk about standards of evidence. Joe, you're on with John and Matt.
Hi, John. Hi, Matt. I'm not on my phone, so I think am I good?
Yeah, you're great. We
Yeah.
can hear you just fine.
All right. Want to I haven't had this conversation in a while. I've called into various different shows before, but this is a topic I haven't gotten on in a while. I saw a clip from the line just yesterday, just a YouTube short that made me think about it, though. And if I could, I want to kind of lay out just like an analogy.
Okay.
For this analogy, I'll say that the story of George Washington and the cherry tree is something that actually did happen. It isn't just one of those parables about, hey, you shouldn't tell lies, blah, blah, blah. It's something that actually took place. And
Just for clarity, Joe, you don't believe that. You're just saying for the sake of the argument, right?
correct.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure I was following. Please continue.
Right. And it's something that is understood to have actually taken place, but I tell you, I do not believe that it took place. And you say to me, well, are you open to being convinced, or are you hard? You'll never believe that this is something that has happened. And I say, no, I'm open to being convinced. And you ask, what evidence are you looking for? And I say, I need to speak to George Washington. I need to speak to George Washington's father, and I need to personally witness everything that happened. George Washington cutting down the tree, telling his father, etc. Am I open to being convinced?
No, you've stated things that are, as far as we can tell, absolutely impossible. Because if George Washington existed, which we can be pretty confident that he did, he's dead. So, and you don't have an ability to go back in time, so you can't do those things. So you've set a standard of evidence that can't be met.
Okay. I have encountered this in conversations with members of the atheist and skeptic community. Matt, I like your answer the best when you've been asked 1,000 different times of, what would it take to convince you? And your answer is always, I don't know, but a seemingly all-powerful God should know and should be able to do whatever it is. But I think some of the time in certain parts of the atheist community online, people say they're agnostically atheist, but generally speaking, I think they come closer to being gnostically atheist. Not that that's a problem.
What? Hold on. Can I interject real quick?
Yes.
Well, so I have a nuanced position on this. As far as God goes in general, I would classify myself as agnostic atheist. But if we're talking about your specific God definition, I definitely will admit that I'm a Gnostic atheist. I make the claim that your God does not exist, right? So It depends on what God we're talking about. I also have problems with your analogy, but I just wanted to interject that real quick.
I can say the analogy is a little sloppy, but a conversation that I have had more than once is talking about the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Which, for the record, I am not Christian, but in talking about that, not that that Jesus being crucified, dying, and being resurrected proves that he is also the all-powerful being that created the universe. It doesn't. But I have spoken with people who have said that, yes, I'm open to being convinced that Jesus was resurrected from the dead, but when asked what evidence they would need, they said the only thing they could think of was they would need to see a modern day autopsy and personally witness. They would need to personally witness a modern day autopsy
Can we stop?
performed on the body of Jesus.
Can we stop? Can we stop?
Yes.
Have I said that? Has John said that?
No.
I'm not here to defend. There are plenty of atheists who don't understand good standards of evidence. I'm not going to defend them. I'm not interested in discussing them. I'm interested in people demonstrating whether or not they have a good reason to believe something, and whether and if we're going to discuss, what kind of evidence would it take or should it take, those kind of discussions. I don't give the tiniest pigeonhole of a fuck what you heard some atheist somewhere say.
Okay.
What else we got?
Okay, so Joe, it seems to me like your main complaint is that atheists have too high of a standard for evidence. But other than these, arguments that you're bringing up that we can't verify anybody is making, nor are either Matt or I making, it seems like you're still kind of upset about the high standard of evidence for proving anything in reality. What for you? Let's shift it a little bit. For you, what is the most compelling evidence that convinces you of a God existing? Since you say that you're not Christian, I'm assuming you don't believe Jesus resurrected from the dead. Is that correct?
I do not. Yes, I do not.
Okay. What's the most compelling evidence for you that God does exist?
I classify myself, the thing I come closest to is deist. And my rationalization for it is that so often, I'm sorry. Someone when asked to describe, I'm sorry, what?
By deist, when people say deist, the standard deistic notion of a God is a God that does not interact with reality in any detectable way. Do you think that God, is that the kind of God you're advocating for?
Generally speaking, yes.
How did you detect the undetectable?
It's the way I rationalize it is that God is often defined as a timeless, spaceless, disembodied mind, which the reply to that is normally if something is timeless and spaceless, then it has existed nowhere and never. But as best as we understand the universe, the Big Bang was the expansion of a singularity. T = 1 was the instant of the Big Bang. So the question then becomes, did the singularity exist? And yes, I realize
how is that at all relevant? Because whether or not the singularity exists tells us nothing at all about any God anywhere, but it definitely doesn't tell us anything about a deistic God. You are advocating for a God that you also have noted cannot be detected, does not interact with reality. How do you detect what can't be detected? And why are you talking about Big Bang cosmology when it can't possibly address the God you believe in?
I think it does, because the question is
Joe,
if a God yes.
Joe, does the deistic God interact with reality at any point in any way that would be detectable?
Beyond the instant of the Big Bang, no.
Well, even including that, the deistic God, how do you detect it in the Big Bang?
I don't claim to have special knowledge.
I'm not asking you for special knowledge, Joe. I'm asking you, how did you detect the undetectable? You are convinced that there's a deistic God. You are simultaneously convinced that you have good reason to believe that there's a God that doesn't interact with reality in any detectable way, and that you have some warrant for believing this. I'm not asking for special knowledge. I'm saying, why do you believe it?
It's how I rationalize the question of the singularity.
Okay, Joe, I give up. I'm not interested in rationalizations. I'm interested in rational.
Yeah. So, Joe, what I'm not hearing is a way to distinguish the most likely natural explanation for the inflation of the universe and a deistic version of God. I guess farting the universe out, or however he created it, incantation, whatever kind of wizardry shit you want to say is how God did it. How do we? What kind of evidence do you either know about or have, or what kind of philosophical argument do you have that distinguishes between the natural explanation and the wizard explanation?
What would be the natural explanation for the expansion?
Well, so we have a lot of different ones. Right. We don't know. There's a lot of different hypotheses.
Yeah. You're saying,
go ahead, Matt.
You're rejecting whatever natural explanation we currently have, or whatever natural explanation we potentially might have, and going with a beyond natural explanation. And John's asking why.
To clarify, it's if the specific whatever it was that caused the expansion of the singularity, I will be an atheist that day once that is discovered. So
John, what you've just said is you've decided that you're going to remain a theist of some stripe, and you've shifted the burden of proof to demonstrate that gods don't exist. Congratulations. Not only have you accepted an absurdity, but now you have set up a scenario. You remember at the beginning we talked about standards of evidence? You just did the cartoon thing that you were trying to use to say that atheists are doing, because you're saying you're going to keep believing until we prove you wrong.
I don't think that there's been any proof of what the I don't know the word, what it was.
I know where you're going. Joe. I know where you're going with that. I understand. But it seems like you have an unequally yoked standard for evidence here, because you're requiring the atheist to have knocked down 99.999% likelihood that God does not exist, or as close to 100% as we can get. But you don't seem to hold the same kind of standard for your evidence. What evidence overwhelmingly suggests to you that it's the cause for the universe is beyond nature, that it's not just naturally caused?
I don't think
we've
it is.
asked this.
I don't think it's.
Hang on. We've asked this a couple of times. We're looking for the evidence and the justification for why you are picking any explanation beyond the non-natural. And the last time we asked this, you were like, I'll be an atheist the day somebody can prove blah. That is a shifting of the burden of proof that is as absurd as what you're objecting to. So what is the reason to accept yours rather than saying, I don't know, I'll wait until there's sufficient evidence to conclude? That's what John's getting at.
Because I think that the concept of what I brought up about the singularity is, if the first instant of time was the moment of the Big Bang, then did the singularity exist?
So personal incredulity is your answer. You're personally incredulous
it's even
about
worse than that. I'm sorry, John. It's not even just, I can't believe these propositions. We could be in a place where there's we have no way of knowing anything about the singularity at all beyond the Planck time. And Joe is saying, when I look at that, I can't see any explanation other than there's some God that did it. And it'll be up to somebody else to show how the singularity existed before then. And the question that John had asked was, what's the reason? And then I was sitting here saying, yeah, what's the reason? Because you shifted the burden of proof. And now you're basically just asserting, do you care about whether or not your beliefs are true, Joe?
On this specific instance, not particularly, because it doesn't affect my life at all.
Goodbye. Because first of all, when I ask someone if they care about whether their beliefs are true, and they're like, on this particular thing, you're already failed. You've already failed if you are debating about whether or not there's categories about whether or not you give a shit if your beliefs are true. But you called in to defend a theistic view and you don't even care if it's true. Why the fuck should we talk to you any further?
Okay. Thanks for taking my call.
Goodbye. Thanks for calling. But if you don't care whether your beliefs are true, it's just a waste of time.
Well, I don't understand why he would call in complaining about the standards of evidence and then have literally no standards of evidence for his side. Like, why are you going to do that?
I talked to these internet atheists and they seem to have really high standards of evidence. You know what? It's really not the case. And I suspect that Joe doesn't understand standards of evidence. But here's something I didn't get to. Let's take 3 claims. There's a guy standing outside. That's claim number 1. There's a magical levitating guy standing outside. That's claim 2. There's a God outside. That's claim 3. When you say, I just came in and made those 3 statements, what sort of evidence would you need in addition to those 3 claims to demonstrate that you have a reasonable warrant to believe them? Well, for the claim, there's a guy outside, I probably don't need anything more than your say-so to believe that you're honestly doing it, but I could be wrong. But I can go out and just kind of peek and look. And that's not because the claim itself carries evidence. I'll get to the why in a second. There's a magical guy outside who's levitating. Your word alone would not be enough to convince me. I would need to investigate that. And there's a God outside. Your word alone definitely isn't going to be doing it. I would need to investigate that too. And then we would have to come up with a way. How did you determine that it's a God? How did you determine the difference between a magical levitating person and a God? What other characteristics and abilities do they have? The reason there are different additional evidence components required beyond your say-so is because we already know, we have a mountain of evidence that People exist. I'm literally a person. Literally, if John walked in my house and said, hey, there's a dude standing out in your driveway, I'm going to take his word and go out there. And if there's not, then John, what are you talking about? I don't see anything. But I didn't need additional evidence to believe John's claim because I'm a dude. John's a dude. Literally, John was just standing in my driveway before he walked into the house. So I know for a fact that dudes can be standing in my driveway. There's already a mountain of evidence that dudes can be standing in my driveway. There's not as much evidence for the notion that a magical levitating guy exists or could be out there. And there's definitely even less evidence for there's a God there, which isn't even well defined. It's not that the claims require different standards of evidence. It's that the claims are either already supported by massive amounts of evidence or they're not supported by massive amounts of evidence. And if you make claims, you will need to add evidence until it gets to that same area of plausibility. It's not that the claim is special. It's that the claim, compared to what we know and understand about reality, is either already supported by a mountain of evidence or it's not.
You know, Matt, one day I'm going to show up in your driveway and just have Arden come in and be like, there's a dude standing in your driveway. And it's just going to be me.
And I hope so. Come on in, take a load off. We'll get you a drink. But all right, we got more theist callers, and we're short on time with John today. So let's make sure we can try and get to Richard's calling from the UK. Richard's a theist who said there is a God, and that's the entirety of it. So Richard, you're on with John and Matt. How can we know that there's a God?
Hello. Yeah, I'd like to say that the way you're asking it today is much more acceptable. You know, you're asking, why do you believe it?
Okay. Richard, I'm going to pause for a second. You're muted. I'm going to take you off mute in a second. There wasn't much here for us to go on, and we're limited on time. So I'll just cut to the chase. I'm not interested in assessments of how we're doing things today or anything. Can we just talk? Can we just be, you say there's a God. We are not yet convinced. What is it that should convince us? That's what we want to know.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what convinces me. The way the world's going, to be honest, and the way how it's foretold in the Bible, all of it, like Armageddon. I mean, Armageddon comes from a city called Megiddo, which is in Syria. And it's all starting to kick off in Syria. Sometimes I don't want God to be true, even though I know that He is. The world scares me, but I feel like the Bible arms me.
You are still avoiding the question.
Am I?
Yeah, because the question was why do I believe it? The question was, how can we know that there's a God, or why should we believe there's a God? And so instead, you started giving us a lecture on the origin of the world, Armageddon, and how sometimes you wish there wasn't a God. So let's get to the answer to the question.
In that case, it's impossible to relate that because you only know when you know. It's like saying you never know, but that's not true.
Goodbye. If your claim is that you know there's a God, but you can only know if you know, wouldn't you acknowledge that is wouldn't you notice that is completely useless to us? Yeah, it would. That's why you went ahead and went with the goodbye. Here's the thing. I'm happy to have conversations with people who genuinely believe, but if you're right out of the gate, like the first call with Joe would have been much shorter if Joe wouldn't have started talking about standards of evidence, when the truth is Joe doesn't care about standard of evidence. And in this case, the last caller called in to tell us there is a God, but that they have no way to demonstrate it. You only know if you know. Well, whoop-de-doo. That's called a tautology. It's not evidence. It's not a reason. It's an excuse for you not defending your beliefs, which is why when we asked you to defend your beliefs, instead you tried to tell us about the origin of Armageddon as if we weren't familiar with it and as if it was relevant, because the origin of the word Armageddon doesn't tell us anything at all about whether or not there's a God or a reason to believe. Let's get some good theistic callers. for John. So Cassius is calling from Minnesota, from JEM, essence and how it warrants God. So sweet, Cassius, you're on with John and Matt. What is essence and how does it warrant God or belief in God?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, before I move on, I just wanted to say that I am a doubting Christian. I've been listening to the show a bit, and I gotta say that I've been listening to the arguments, and they've been making sense. And I'm kind of just, playing with any rusty cards that I have left, see what they got in store. When it comes down to essence, what I am talking about is the properties of a certain thing, like an apple. It's round, it's red, and I guess the big question here, when it comes down to these properties of the essence, is what exactly holds these things together, holds these properties of these different things, or what is the one foundational thing that holds these things together? Now, I've been raised to believe that it was something that was transcendent, like a god, but I've been on the fence, and I've been wondering what exactly you, as an atheist who is a naturalist, what would be your explanation to what holds the essence of a certain thing together?
So I'll give a really brief thing here because I want to get John in because he's got short on time, and also, so the thing you're calling essence, it seems to be a mix of things we would refer to with regard to ontology, but also epiphenomenon. So you'd have to make a list and see what it was, but I think the fundamental flaw in what you were saying is, what's the one thing that holds all this together? You're presuming that the properties that you observe and identify and categorize are ontologically a function or a part of the thing, and not a characteristic that you are imbuing the thing with, and you're assuming that they all have the same justification or grounding. And I reject all of those things. So if you're like, hey, what makes the apple red? Well, red is the label that we put on a particular, wavelength of light that we perceive, and what makes it reflect more of that particular light, or a sufficient level for us to label it there, is a product of how the chemistry forms the skin of it and all those things. You can get reductive on it like that, but it seems like you're skipping past that to be like, what is the cosmic justification for redness? And I don't even recognize that redness is a thing. So maybe there's something else essence wise, but you seem to be assuming that there's not only is there some explanation for the essence, but that it all comes from the same thing. And I think those are flawed assumptions.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have a, my first question would be, what is this essence that you're talking about? I don't really have a practical way of like modeling like what an essence is. Like, if you could explain what you mean by essence a little bit more, that would help me out.
Yeah, I've been trying to establish it well, but from what I'm familiar with, and please forgive me, I'm really speaking what's been spoon-fed to me for the past couple of years. I am a doubter once again, but like essence, what I mean is like more of the whatness of the thing. It really is just like what makes up an apple, or the properties of an apple, or like a human, for example.
So as far as like, let's go with the apple. The apple has certain chemical, signatures and everything like that make up the apple, and that's what gives the apple its properties. You could think of like, water's cohesion, is cohesion the one where the water adheres to a surface? I believe that's the cohesion. Like, that's a property of the water molecule, and that's because of how the water molecule forms its bonds and how it forms bonds between water molecules and everything like that. So, like, all of these properties that you're talking about, they're properties because of, physics, like the underlying physics of reality sort of dictate those kinds of things. And so like what Matt was trying to explain with like red being a certain spectrum of the visible electromagnetic spectrum. I mean, these are just, things that we give names to and things that we acknowledge about things, but like the underlying principle is just, nature. So I feel like what you need to do in order to make your whole idea of how essence is proving God, or that God is necessary for these attributes to occur in nature, you would have to somehow find where God fits into nature. Like, other than just ad hoc claiming that God is required for nature to operate, what is your evidence that God is required for nature to operate?
Yeah, I do understand, and those are beautiful responses. Yeah, that's fair enough. That is pretty consistent with the epistemologies you guys follow. So, all right, I got you. I guess what I have to do admit is, I was actually witnessing a conversation between atheist friend and Christian friend of mine, and I noticed that an atheist was saying similar things to it, and I felt like that's a fair response, and I feel like that response was fine. What I'm talking about is something in the lines of Thomistic epistemology, and the more I've been studying it, the more less and less compelling it's been. But other than that, I do appreciate the answer. Yeah, I have nothing else to say. Thank you for having me in. And before I do leave, I do apologize on behalf of some of the other theists, misrepresenting some things when it comes down to cosmology. I do see the hypocrisy when a lot of theists will kind of, blame atheists for bastardizing or misrepresenting their religion, but I see my same people misrepresenting physics, biology, and what have you, and it's big projection. So I apologize on behalf on the theist community for that.
Well, I appreciate the thought. Nobody gets to apologize on behalf of anybody else, and it's not your fault. I just, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at thanks. But.
Yeah, of course. Other than that, thank you very much. Very, very great response, and nothing else to say. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassius. Have a good day. I'm incredibly excited for this next call, and I'm going to take it, even though, because I want to make sure we get to it really quickly. Joel, or is it Joel, calling from France? Pronouns are he, him? You may be. I see you on the web. Oh, there you are. I can hear you now. Is it Joel or Joel?
Hello.
Okay. Your mic is terrible and gravelly. I've muted you for just a second. It says here, you're asking, does Matt have the same epistemic standard of evidence for the claim that Jesus rose from the dead and the claim that men can become pregnant? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to mute you because I'm sick of listening to you breathe into it and whatever voice changer, and you probably won't get to speak at all. So if you want to hang up, that's fine, but I'm going to answer your question quickly and honestly. Yes, I have the exact same standard of evidence for the claim that Jesus rose from the dead as I do for the claim that men can become pregnant. As I just gave a lecture, you can rewind a little bit, where I talked specifically about standards of evidence and how the evidence for there's a dude standing in my driveway already exists, so there may not need to be much of anything beyond the claim, whereas the claim that there's a God standing outside doesn't have a ton of supporting evidence. And so you would need to add evidence to it to get it up to that same standard. So first of all, when it comes to Jesus rising from the dead, Jesus may or may not have existed, but men definitely exist. Number two, I have no evidence of anyone rising from the dead in the way that Jesus is reported to rise from the dead, but I have tons of evidence for people becoming pregnant in the way that men can become pregnant. I have no empirical evidence of the rising from the dead event, and I have mountains of empirical evidence related to pregnancy. I also have an understanding that gender isn't strictly tied to your ability to get pregnant or your chromosomes. A trans man may become pregnant. And so already, as we know trans men who are pregnant, we are now in a position where men have been pregnant. But it's more than that, because even if you're one of those people who defines men as someone with XY chromosomes, there are people with XY chromosomes who have androgen insensitivity syndrome. And because of that, for complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, despite the fact that they have XY chromosomes and you would consider them men, they have female genitalia, and we have evidence that they can and have become pregnant with assistance. So my evidence that men can become pregnant, the standard of evidence is exactly the same for that as it is for any other claim. The problem is when you say Jesus rose from the dead, you have to come with a lot more than if you say men can get pregnant, because there's already a mountain of evidence related to men and pregnancy that supports the notion that in a context, there are men that can become pregnant, and there are people with XY chromosomes with AIS that can also become pregnant. None of that stuff exists for the concept of Jesus rising from the dead. And there you go. Let me double check there. Joel, does that answer your question? Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, he's a troll. I muted him.
But so even when there's trolls, there's a lot of different ways to potentially handle it. One is to let them go on and on and on and on and on and on and on for days. And the other one is what I just did. Let me make sure this is the question you're asking, and I will answer it, and you can piss off. Because the fact of the matter is, men can become pregnant. I'm pretty sure that I can't. I'd be willing to bet that John probably can't, but you know what? I don't know. And it's none of my business. And at no point have I known what any of my friends' chromosomes were, or their gametes, or their gonads, or anything. It's really wild how much you guys obsess about stuff, and how much of an epic failure you are every time you want to try to come at me on standards of evidence. My standards of evidence exist so that I don't end up as a gullible religious buffoon or an ignorant bigot who is obsessed with probably whatever their kink is. But thanks for calling. We got like 25 minutes before we're going to lose John today. But Chubbs is calling in from Kansas. It's been on hold for a while. Chubbs was on, and then we got some Theist callers. And Chubbs was also, I think, in my Twitch stream earlier. I see your call from the web client if you're doing that. Yeah, there you go. So how you doing, Chubbs? What do you got for us?
I'm great, man. Thank you for asking. Pleasure being on the show with you guys. Been following you for years. John, no disrespect. I'm glad I found out who you are today. I'll be looking up your content as well. My main question of the evening. So I was raised in a Muslim household. I've become an agnostic over time, trying my best to kind of find what my version or what the truth is, I guess you could say. But at the end of the day, it's just everybody's versions. But where I get stumped the most is when I'm talking to a Muslim, and they bring up the scientific miracles of the Quran, and I don't really know how to challenge that properly, because the standard of evidence for somebody that's faith-based is very different than the standard of evidence for somebody that is basing their decisions off of logic, facts, rationale, whatever it may be. So how would you advise somebody like me to go upon that, or how do you even argue against it yourself? I've watched your talks with Muhammad Hijab and many others, but I guess I just want a little bit more clarification.
John, have you done events with Muhammad Hijab?
No, that would be you, I believe. Back in 2019.
I don't think I ever did, but maybe
2019, I believe. Anyway. Yeah.
John, what do you say about the Quranic miracles propositions?
Well, so I think that the Quranic miracles also suffer from the same thing that the prophecies in like the Old Testament, and how Christians use those prophecies to affirm that Jesus is the Son of God and that he actually did resurrect from the dead. Because like in the show notes, or in the call notes, it has an example being, have those who disbelieved not considered that the heavens and the earth were a joined entity. And that's a perfect example of how ambiguous these so-called prophecies, or like miracles, or scientific miracles can be. And on my own channel, I do have like a whole playlist of like anti Islamic sort of responses, or me responding to Islamic videos. And basically what it boils down to is that everything that they say is a scientific miracle is actually not a scientific miracle, and that the verses in the Quran are so vague that you could literally make them mean anything, so that they're always going to be fulfilled. And the Christians use the same kind of argument, like when they talk about Genesis 1:1 and how, everybody thought it was an eternal universe, and then the Big Bang was discovered, and that affirmed the Bible. And it's like, no, because there's a like what the Bible says in Genesis 1 is a far cry from what the actual explanation is, as far as we currently understand it. Like, we don't understand it completely, obviously, but like it's definitely a far cry from how the Bible describes it. So the scientific miracles, I guess, are miracles and are fulfilled or in some kind of fashion if you are very loose with your interpretation and allow for a lot of presumption to go into it, like a lot of presumptions to go into it, and for you to just ad hoc claim some things mean one thing or another. Because, like with the example here of the heavens and the earth were a joined entity, what does that even mean? What did the author mean by this? Were they meaning specifically that like everything in the universe is built out of these very simple elements, and so like the earth formed over millions of years and then took billions of years for life to come about? Like, is that what it means? Like, if you take a very loose interpretation of it, sure, you can make that fit, but like that's taking a lot of liberties with all of these miracles.
I guess for me, what kind of makes it a little bit more difficult is if we continue on. So I was only able to fit X amount of characters in the statement prior to coming onto the show, but it continues on to say, and we separated them and made from water every living thing. So there was an addition, I just couldn't fit it onto it, and that's Surah 21:30. And from there,
Except
I guess
every living thing isn't made from water.
Can you give me an example? Because that's something I am struggling with.
Name a living thing that's made from water. I'm not aware of any living thing that is made from water.
Sure. No, that's fair. I guess, and once again, going back to what John said and it being ambiguous, the percentage of, I guess, composition that we are made of is water. Is that not correct?
Sure. Your body contains water, but it's not made of water. It's like cells store water for usage. It's not like, when you look at the chemistry of biology, I'm carbon-based, but it's not like there are 8 water molecules that are functional of me. It's like if you had a box and you put a bunch of stuff in the box, and then you also put water in to fill the rest of the space in the box, is the box made of water?
Well, no, of course not.
No. And yet, that's kind of what they're saying here. But at the end of the day, let's assume that they were right and that we are made up mostly of water. How do you show that the reason that claim is correct is because there is a God who told somebody?
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I'm having issues, because while this may not at least illustrate the actual God, it's the chances that if that is correct, that they got it right. I'm having issues proving to myself that a 7th century man managed to, even with some ambiguity, get some of these statements partially or fully correct to the point where I don't know if I can leave it up to chance. And there's many other examples that I look at. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, typically whenever I run into apologists that proclaim these things, that these are scientific miracles that the Quran or the Bible specifies, I first have to look at a lot of different things. One of those things is what was common knowledge at the time that this was written. So like for the Quran, you're talking about the 7th century. And so like, you can't sit there and be like, oh, well, the Quran knew that the earth was round and everything. And, this is in the 7th century CE that it was written. So like, of course, they already knew that the Earth was a sphere, and most people knew that the Earth was orbiting around the sun by the 7th century CE, I believe. And but the Quran also says that the sun travels in a set path, thinking that the sun is somehow orbiting around the earth, which seems to be a bit bass backwards from reality. So, I mean, like for every, I guess my point is that you have to look at what the common knowledge was at the time, whether that could have influenced like what they're saying, or if this was an emerging fact or like an emerging scientific discovery, which they didn't have science in the 7th century CE, but at least it's science as we know it now. So, I mean, what was the intellectual thought at the time? Was this an emerging thing that was coming out and was just now starting to be believed? So you kind of have to take the context into account, but then you also have to take into account the ambiguity of the statement. Like if they make the statement so ambiguous that you could fit literally any future discovery into it, then that doesn't really make it all that miraculous. It just makes it an ambiguous statement that has no connection to scientific discoveries or anything.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Go ahead.
Two quick things. One, I while I don't necessarily know if I can recommend him on other things because I haven't talked to him in years, I know Apostate Prophet has done some videos going through the scientific claims in the Quran and giving responses, and many of his responses are great. But one thing to keep an eye on, and this is just from me because as you saw earlier today in my Twitch channel, I'm never not in debate mode. And so John was mentioning the Quran talking about the sun moving along a set path. And you need to ask, what was the original intended statement and what was the original intended meaning of the statement? Because that's technically right. From a purely scientific standpoint, the sun is moving through the cosmos on a path that is fixed by the physical laws that dictate how it goes, but there's no reason at all to think that whoever wrote that meant that deterministic laws of that are governing this have predicted we can tell where the sun is going to be in 30 billion years or 10 billion years or 5 minutes or whatever else. And so figuring out how to tell what was originally intended, because what ends up happening is, and this goes back to what John was saying before, which was brilliant, and that's this notion that there's vagary there, but what they try to do is hide the vagueness by saying, oh, no, when you interpret this correctly, the vagueness goes away. And now it's not only correct, it's the best kind of correct because it's technically correct. And we all know that technically correct is the best kind.
No, I understand. I know what you mean. I guess for me, it's just like the technicality meeting coincidence is just really hard for me to fathom. That's the part that's kind of getting me the most because, yeah, you're right. From a subjective point of view, they can interpret things any way they want and make anything they want correct. You're 100% correct there. But it just, once again, the probability of them using that as their explanation of how the universe kind of, or not the universe, but our sun and the earth kind of operate is kind of like a shot in the dark. And if they were making scientific or their version of science advances in the explanation of how the sun orbits, how the sun kind of works, etc., then it would be almost like a gamble for them to make such a claim, because in the next could have been within the lifetime of their prophet or whoever else it may be, their followers at the very least, within the next 50 to 100 years, they could have proven that to be incorrect, and then all of a sudden Islam falls apart. So for me, it's like they take so many gambles at explanations, whether they be scientific or whatever else it may be, and none of them have been enough, at least for us to be able to say for sure Islam's not correct. And so when a Muslim does throw these things in my face, I have a really hard time being like, yeah, this is just a coincidence. This was just a gamble. Prove it to me in a way that makes more sense. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm sure you do.
Well, I do, but I also don't think that Islam would crumble if they made a gamble on some kind of explanation and it falls apart. Because, I mean, I have more experience with Christianity, and I see that happening all the time in Christianity, especially with Old Testament texts, but also in the New Testament. That happens all the time, and Christianity hasn't fallen apart. So I think that they could make up some kind of bullshit explanation for something and it turn out to be completely wrong. They'll figure out a way to rationalize it.
That's true. Their attempt at harmonizing for sure. Do you guys have, I guess, to leave it on this, because I know John has limited time and I want to leave room for another 10 minutes for another caller. What is your best, I guess you could say, position or argument to make, with a Muslim, to kind of, I think you know what I'm trying to ask. I just don't know how to put it into words. I don't want to persuade a Muslim he's wrong necessarily, but at least to question their beliefs in a way that works.
So I don't normally phrase it this way, but for Muslims, for Christians, for anybody, it needs to be, let's take a look at what kind of epistemological foundation or requirements you have. Because if you look at just the calls today, it's, oh, you've shifted the burden of proof. Oh, you're going to keep believing until somebody proves you're wrong. Oh, you think the standards of evidence are just too high. Cool. Show me how you're using standards of evidence that convince you that there's a miracle performing God that would not also justify other things that you don't believe in or actively reject. Because if you're going with a general God concept, that lets in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. That goes up all the way through the Abrahamic God. All of them are tied to the same thing. And yet they don't believe the follow-ups from those. And so it's, okay, what additional evidence beyond the claim is being presented? And how can you show that the best explanation, that this is more likely, just not just consistent with, but points directly to the conclusion you've reached?
Fair enough. Yeah, I guess the issue I'll probably end up having at one point or another is, once again, their standard of evidence seems to be very different than like an atheist standard of evidence. Once again, they're basing all their beliefs on a faith-based, scripture, whereas you based yours on, I guess you could say, science and mathematics and whatever else may be. John, do you have anything else to add?
I think the biggest, I'll let John answer in just a second. I think the biggest issue is that people need to get more comfortable with saying, I don't know, because is there a God? My answer is, I don't know. Is the God of Christianity or Islam real? My answer is almost certainly not. But is there some God? I don't know. And I don't know how you would know. And so that's why I keep asking people, give me the reason why. But go ahead, John.
No, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, typically with any religious apologist, I just end up trying to focus on like what evidence do they have, or what arguments do they have, and then what evidence do they have to support their argument. And so, like, unless they have like some kind of like hard evidence that shows that their argument is logically sound or actually makes sense, then I'm, it's just not going to convince me. And from what I've found is that every time I'm in a conversation with somebody, they always give me some kind of argument that either either makes ad hoc speculations, or they just simply believe something, which is kind of like an ad hoc speculation, I guess. They just believe it because the Bible says it, or whatever religious text they have says it. And so like they end up having very specious reasons for believing in the things that they do. And until I can get somebody that can actually give me evidence that supports their conclusion, that's kind of where I stand and where I kind of attack, the religious arguments.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So basically, if they say that their beliefs stem from, let's say, the Bible or the Quran, I feel like maybe the best way to go about that then is to find inconsistencies within that book and then challenge them based on something other than where that belief system stems from. If you disable the belief system stemming from a scripture, you essentially force them to come up with evidence outside of that text. Is that fair enough?
I guess so. Yeah. Could you say it one more time?
Yeah. So basically, if somebody is stemming their beliefs or their quote unquote facts from a scripture, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, whatever it may be, finding inconsistencies within those scriptures kind of dismantles that belief system. So it forces them to seek seek those truths, seek those facts from something outside of that specific source. Would that be fair to say?
I don't know. I feel like
I'm genuinely having a
religious
hard
people
time
are,
finding the. I'll just stop because no, go ahead, John, because I'm having a hard time following the question.
I'm
well,
having a hard
I
time
don't
putting
think
it together, if I'm being honest.
I don't think that it would basically pointing out inconsistencies in a person's religion will cause their, religion to collapse or their religious belief to collapse. I think that there's several ways that they can handle that kind of cognitive dissonance. They can just reject whatever kind of information you're putting out and stubbornly just continue believing in the inconsistencies. I believe in sort of a war of attrition in that particular respect. Like, if it's somebody that you regularly interact with and everything like that, just consistently bringing up how they need good evidence or how this evidence doesn't actually prove the conclusion, explaining that to them, I think over time you can wear somebody down to where they change their mind. But I don't think that just simply pointing out inconsistencies can would have an immediate effect. I think that over time, showing how the reasons why they believe in something doesn't make sense, I think over time that can wear them down to where they end up changing their belief.
Okay. Fair enough. War of attrition it will be. Guys, thank you so much for taking my question. It was honestly an honor. I've been following Matt for years, and I'm very happy to have been here today and even ask my sometimes silly questions. But thank you so much again. Enjoy continuing the show, and let's go Chiefs.
Yeah, go Chiefs. I don't even know how good they're going to do this year, but thanks, Chubbs. I was born in Kansas City, so the Chiefs won the Super Bowl the year I was born, and then they didn't win again for years. And I don't really care that much about football or sports ball, but I was a Chiefs fan because, along with everybody else for a while, and then they kept disappointing me. And now I'm a Chiefs fan again, and not because of Taylor Swift, although that doesn't hurt. Anyway, John's got to head out. And so, first of all, it's been ages since we got to do a show together. So thanks. And I hope we get to do another one soon. If you get Wednesday nights free, I'd love to have you on a hang up soon. But
oh yeah, I've you just let me know when you can have me on, and I'm sure I can be on. I have my son every other Wednesday, so I mean there's just a little bit of a restriction, but you just let me know like a couple of Wednesdays and I'll let you know which one I can do.
Yep, no problem. Let's everybody in chat throw up a big, just type 1 as a thank you for John as the first co-host of the day, and then I'll tell you who's going to come in here. But take care, man. I'm going to keep on going, and we're going to bring in somebody here to not replace John, but fill in a pale comparison.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for letting me on today and everything like that. And I'll see everybody later. Y'all have an awesome day. Don't forget to stand up, use your voice, and all that kind of good shit. Bye, everybody.
I just managed to get everybody to completely spam our chat, which is, I think probably a good thing. The moderators are probably like, why the fuck did you do that? I can hear myself coming back to me.
Oh, man.
Yep.
Sorry, I'll fix it. I'll have to mute. Arden, if you'll just mute me while I fix that. Sorry.
Yep, muted.
So here, I told you it'd be a pale comparison. We brought some Jimmy Snow guy in here who's, I think he's got a podcast. The Lion's got a podcast. Oh my God. That's awesome. Brilliant. There we go. Jimmy Gleason's getting everything set up right there. On that note though, before we have callers, we have atheist callers, we have theist callers, and we have a Hindu caller as well. We're going to try to get to all of those. Is Jimmy Snow? Jimmy Snow's good.
I think we're good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I no longer hear myself echoed back at me. So welcome.
I reset my soundboard today because everybody was complaining about the audio quality on the podcast. And we're like, they sound better, even though you've got the more advanced mic. Only to figure out after resetting all of it, it was literally my watch because I put my hand up here like that. And my watch has 4G or 5G. I don't know which one it does, but it was my watch. My watch was the interfering with the mic, it turned out.
Also, you sound slightly muted through that mic.
Muted?
Not in a bad way. Just listen to
Okay.
the show later. It's fine. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
You want to jump into some calls?
Yeah, the line has a podcast. Links in the description.
There you go. It's the whole reason Jimmy's here is because I keep forgetting to say the line has a podcast. Jay is calling from Texas. Pronouns are she, her. Has a question about, is LGBT a religion? So Jay, you're on with Jimmy and Matt. If you're on your phone, you may need to tap it to wake up the browser and then tap the browser again so that
Oh. I
So,
prefer that
Jimmy,
to the
let's-
other troll
let's-
callers.
Yeah, I mean, it's at least something. I'm wondering, is LGBT a religion? I figure we might as well just treat the question fair so that they don't ever have to call back.
I had the whole plan of making them define religion and all of that kind of stuff, but obviously the answer is no. Put simply, there is no deity, there is no worship, there's no system of worship, there's no supernatural element of devotion. The religion has a meaning, and LGBT would not fit it. Even if people thought it was made up, even if you thought LGBT wasn't a real thing, it wouldn't quite make a religion. I do understand that we could say we feel that way about certain things that perhaps seem religious but aren't religions, like crystal healing and stuff. There are people who don't believe it's some supernatural thing tied to any kind of worship, and so maybe it's more just like it's religious. But yeah, anyway, even if it was made up, which it isn't, and it's driving me insane, all this LGBT up in my brain. Yeah. It's
So-
not religion.
Yeah, the reason I kind of was mildly interested in the call, whether it came from, and by the way, that's everybody's going to have, little differences on how they interact and stuff with calls that are perhaps disingenuous or absolutely disingenuous. My take is let's see if we can get the question, because if it's a good enough question, we can at least address it. I think religion is kind of ill-defined. And there's people who are like, oh, being a Dallas Cowboys fan, that's your religion. Okay. To the extent that religion could just be like something I care about, sure. You could do that for any number of things. But it's like, oh, when does something truly qualify as religion? I would be interested in kind of maybe coming up with categories of religion, but at the end of the day, yeah, there's no God, there's no tenets, there's no dogma. It is, here's an ideological position. And by the way, LGBT isn't an ideological position. LGBTQIA plus, or whatever variety of the letters you put together, is a label for, at most, a recognition that a certain collection of things can be addressed as a collective. Like queer culture, ooh, that includes this, and this. Because, by the way, lesbian, gay, bisexual, those are about sexuality. Then the T is transness, which has nothing to do with sexuality, or at least isn't tied to it, even though it ends up, similarly categorized. And then it becomes, the generic queer, the inquisitive or searching, and all these different things. But I don't know. Wow, my phone has decided to beep, 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 beep.
Don't think it was our fault. Could be, though. We're probably one of them.
Nope. It was one of them. So we got a couple callers left. Let's talk to Mark calling from Bangladesh. Mark's on the web client, pronouns are he, him. So you may have to tap your phone to wake it up and then tap the browser, but has some question or point to make on religious violence. Are you there, Mark? Mark went away. Sweet.
Is Arden
So,
screening right now,
looks
or
like-
somebody else?
No, we have
Hello?
our screener dragon today.
Okay.
I already put somebody live. So Ian's calling from Washington, pronouns are they, them. Ian's a theist with proof to ultimately get the answer to whether or not God exists that will make Matt a believer. Ian, I already don't think you're remotely serious, but let's have it.
I love it. Great. I love the skepticism. Matt made me into a true
it's
skeptic.
not skepticism. It's not skepticism. It is, you say you're a theist, and you're saying that you have the ability to get the answer of whether or not a God exists such that it will make me a believer. And yet you're calling the show and not getting a Nobel Prize. I'm more than a little dubious.
I want you to get the Nobel Prize for it. I want you to get
now
all the credit.
I think you're even more full of shit. So let's just get to proving it.
Okay. Can I give you a little background on my personal life?
Is your personal life remotely relevant to whether or not you can demonstrate a God to me?
Yes, because it comes from.
Then I believe you even less, and I don't think you have even the beginnings of an understanding of sound epistemology. But give me the brief background.
Can I try?
You think would actually no. Why don't you wait till I'm finished talking?
Okay.
Because I was just getting ready to say, go ahead and give me the background that you think is relevant to proving that a God exists.
Okay. All right. So I was raised in a cult, Jehovah's Witnesses, for the first 50 years of my life. And I believed it heart and soul. And when the reality of that started to crumble, I basically lost all belief. I realized I couldn't believe anything anymore. And you were part and parcel to that. You helped get me the answer that there is no God. And so I appreciate all that you've done for that. And then I started looking into, well, then what is there? And so then I started to swing back towards being a believer. And it was kind of a weird experience. And part of what made me a believer is watching this growing movement of people saying that there's a great awakening. There's an awakening of consciousness of humanity. And so what really intrigued me is these channelers that say that they're, channeling Jesus or Mary or, whatever. And so there's one out there, he goes by I can't remember, Daryl is the actual name of the individual, but he channels a so-called six-dimensional being named Bashar, twin flame. And I thought one of the best ways that you could demolish the movement is if you set up a debate with him, with the so-called channel.
Ian, you've now wasted way more of my time than you should, demonstrating that you do not understand what's relevant. I don't set up debates in the first place. I'm not interested in debating some channeler. Your backstory is irrelevant to the channeler. It's irrelevant to all of this. And if you want to blame me for you losing all beliefs, which wasn't possible, you never, ever existed without any beliefs, and you being convinced that there is no God, which is not the position that I'm actually advocating for, all you've done is demonstrate confusion at every single point here. Where is the fucking thing that proves God? Last fucking chance.
Well, that's the whole thing, that's why there is
No. If that's the whole thing, your sentence is over. You're done. Goodbye. I knew it. I fucking knew it, Jimmy.
I'm just trying to look this dude up. I suspect this is one of those like, well, if we could get that debate, it would draw more eyes to this guy. And I don't know. I don't know what the point is, but the person looks like a magical thinking modern day John Edwards person.
So first of all, I don't believe anything about that call. I don't believe you were in a Jehovah's Witness cult for 50 years, because I don't think you sound old enough to have been in a Jehovah's Witness cult for 50 years. Then you definitely didn't lose all beliefs, even if you were convinced that you did, because a belief is just the acceptance of something as true. And you will always accept something as true, even if the only thing you can accept as true is that you exist. So you still have beliefs. Then you say that I convince you there is no God, which is a fundamental perversion of anything and everything that I'm advocating for. I'm a skeptic, I'm a humanist, and I'm an atheist. And I'm an atheist because of skepticism, but atheism is not there are no gods. Atheism is I am not convinced of any gods, and I may be convinced that some specific gods definitely don't exist. And this had you, your confusion about what there was, has you swinging back to be a believer, and you want to watch this movement of awakening of consciousness of humanity, which is a bunch of gobbledygook, meaningless fucking phrasing. And they're channeling Jesus or Mary, but now you found Daryl, who channels a sixth-dimensional being. You have no idea what a sixth-dimensional being, and neither does anybody else. It's absolute garbage, fucking navel-gazing, smelling your own farts crap. And you think that setting up a debate with him would demolish the movement, but you were supposed to be telling me exactly what would prove God to me. So you are either incredibly confused or a liar or both. So thanks. Hey, you want to try this? Kiwi is calling from Ohio, saying that Jesus appeared to them, and yet they're routing through the web browser in Indonesia, and we're already breathing funny and almost laughing when I put them live. So, Kiwi, how can I know that Jesus appeared to you? Hello?
You forgot to tap your phone while you're going to continue your troll, douchebag.
You got to tap your web browser to wake it up, and then tap it again so that you can speak. And then you can answer my question, how can I know that Jesus appeared to you?
Well.
Okay. You have failed at prank calling. Thanks for trying. All right, we have Mark calling back. Mark was calling from Bangladesh with a question or comment about religious violence. So you're back, Mark. Thank you for calling back.
Hey, Matt. I'm so excited to be on your show. I interviewed you a couple of times on my show. I don't know if you remember me, but
yeah,
a lot of you remember me, right?
Yes, we're here. I remember. Go ahead.
So a lot of things. I would like to share a lot of things that has happened in my country, and one of the things is the extremists taking over. So our government fell, and now the religious extremists are taking over, and we are not allowed to speak our minds. Like freedom of speech is totally out of the question. And like countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, it's a big issue that religious violence. So I would like to put this thought how to deal with this, and if you are aware of this part of the world, how we handle this. Because you know that we're ostracized.
Okay. I don't know enough about what's going on, but I also don't know what to do.
Are you saying that in Bangladesh the secular government fell, and or you're saying that there's religious violence against? Because Bangladesh has last I checked, has a secular parliamentary system.
Right. The Constitution. Yes. Actually, it's a paradox, because the Constitution says we are secular, but it also says Islam is the religion, is the state religion. So that's in itself, it's a paradox.
Sure. Which party is in power over there?
Right now, Dr. Yunus is in power. But he's backed by the other party. It was the party that was against our independence, and
sorry, who did you say? Who's the prime minister right now? Is that who are you saying? Or are you saying the president?
He's not elected or anything. He's just in charge right now. So the head of
What's
the
his? I mean,
government.
what's his official position? I'm just trying to very brief. I haven't
Okay,
talked much or looked into Bangladesh in a while, so I'm just. What's his position in the
right.
government that he's in charge? Is he president? Is he prime minister? Is he nothing?
No, it's like the chief. I'm not exactly sure what the position is, but the chief of government right now. It's not
So what
So
happened to the
really a
according to
prime
post.
minister?
Wikipedia, Bangladesh has a president, Mohammed Shahabuddin,
Yeah,
and then
he
a
can't
chief
do anything.
advisor who is Mohammed
Chief,
Yunus, and a chief
exactly.
justice
He's a
who
chief
is Ed
advisor.
Rifat Ahmed. Oh, never mind. I just won't talk.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Matt. He's the chief advisor, Dr. Yunus.
But the president is symbolic in Bangladesh, right? The prime minister is the one with the actual power. So how does the president's chief advisor have any power?
The president has no power.
Yeah.
The chief advisor has all the power, and all the other advisors right
That's what
now
I'm
they're in
asking.
power. Yeah, so that's how our government is working right now.
Okay. Is that how
According
it's
to
supposed to work?
Wikipedia,
Go ahead.
according to Wikipedia, the president is the commander in chief of Bangladesh Armed Forces. Is that not true?
Yes, theoretically that's true, but in practice, even the armed forces they're being controlled by extremist Muslim leaders, the Jamaat Islam. They're controlling everything.
Okay. So I'm wondering. I just want to figure out what we're trying to get to, because obviously Jimmy and I have no real, like, an eyedropper's worth of understanding of Bangladesh and Bangladeshi culture and Bangladeshi government. But I also don't know what we can do or talk about.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with you the atrocities and like how we don't have freedom of speech. Our society is not willing to accept any views that goes against their views. So this is like a society that's terrible for non-believers like us,
Okay.
like me. So just wanted to share that
Yeah,
with
I'm
you guys.
hoping that our country doesn't become like that.
Right.
What is it people can do? Because I've talked to you and others before in Bangladesh, and
Yes,
they were atheists who were killed for speaking out.
exactly.
People under threat.
Bloggers who were killed. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, just
What
for
is it?
writing against Islam.
What option do any of you have to correct the direction that your government has gone? Because if we learn no other lesson, it may be
Mhm.
to act before it's too late.
No, what we're trying to like do shows like you do, and become aware of uh, like most people they haven't read the Quran, and they don't know, they just say that it's word of God and it's perfect, impeccable. But once they start reading, just like Christians come on your show, and we try to do the same, and we say that go ahead and read your Quran, and then they say that there's translations are wrong, or there's other explanation and things like that. And then when they don't have any reason, they don't have any argument. The the last thing they do is try to um, become violent. So that's the last resort to save their religion. That's what we are facing.
Do you think you and other atheists in Bangladesh, um, what do you? I mean, I know you're trying to get information out, and
Hmm.
that
Yes.
that maybe the next step might involve violence, but um, setting aside atheism and just going with general opposition to Islam or to an Islamic sort of caliphate government type thing,
Hmm.
what options do you and the people who agree with you have I mean, you're not going to be able to change the government. It is violent revolution the only option that's left, and you just have to build towards it?
I think yes. I think
I'm
only option.
okay. Sorry, I have to kind of, because I'm confused, because I what knowledge I did have, I was trying to like piece together things, but okay. So now the things that we need to fill in is back in August, there were basically massive protests which forced your prime minister, who was the prime minister for a while, to resign. That was the head of the government. That's where this guy Eunice comes in, more than the chief advisor, is basically the head of an interim government. This Eunice person who is running your government is far more progressive than the old government. So it seems to me that it's heading the correct direction. Is that wrong? Because like just what I'm pulling up on Human Rights Watch, which is the first place I was checking to try and piece together these things that seem to have been missing. It actually seems like Eunice is, for example, trying to figure out what happened with all the forced disappearances and end anything related to that kind of stuff. So I guess I'm very confused.
No, the thing is the way he came into power. So he all the advisors and the students who were behind the revolution were overthrowing our former prime minister. So it's a meticulous design that he planned. And
right, but it kind of sounds like you're saying there was a bit of a violent revolution and pushback with him at the front to stop the like disappearances, all the extrajudicial killings. There was torture. There was all kinds of stuff going on, and that he headed basically, I don't know what you want to call it, a coup, a protest that resulted in him taking power. And it's as an interim government, and that you will have elections to decide somebody new. So to me, when you're asking like what you should do, I am not there, so I can't say certainly, but with the information I have, which with a little intro on you, with the little bit of history I knew about the area, and now also pulling up the Human Rights Watch stuff, it sort of seems to me like the thing you want to be doing is supporting the pathway to that election for when the interim government is no longer necessary, and otherwise be supportive of the movements that are, or of the portions of that government that were literally ending like these really bad human rights violations.
Right. What we want is a democratic government, fair and election that is supported by people, and a government that's elected by people. And we want,
and that's meant to happen at some point, correct?
Yes, but we want this to be fair and free.
Sure.
And we also want the Constitution to reflect all those things that we want, like free speech, freedom of religion expression, and atheists to live, atheists or any other, like Hindus, Christians, all live together. Right.
So if the call came with the question of what you should do, I would say the next step to support, because you can only do one thing at a time, is whatever is necessary to make sure that those elections happen, and support those elections. As I mean, they're going to need lots of people to be vote counters, to staff voting locations, all that kind of stuff. Get involved as much as you can while keeping your an ear out for how these movements and things are extending. But like I said, it sounds like as far as like getting closer, it seems like things actually are going that direction. Not to say that they're great. I'm sure like a progressive Bangladeshi overturning like the super violent human rights. I mean, if they're still fundamentally Muslim, I'm sure that there are shortcomings from what their government's going to be, but I would be, it seems like y'all are headed up while we're headed down. Not to say that y'all are in a better spot than we are right now. Certainly you are not. But it does seem like yours is at least going the right direction.
No. I would like to think we're going towards the right direction, but in reality, it's not. So it's all like under control of fundamentalists, and I don't think there's going to be a fair election ever. But
Eunice isn't himself a fundamentalist, correct?
No, he's not. But he came to power through those people. So he's
Sure. And through force, which is the thing you were kind of
Yes, through
asking.
force.
And it's kind of one of those things, if
Exactly.
you go to war with the people you have, not the people you want. And the
Right.
force, when your con asks, like, is a violent revolution something we should consider or whatever, it sounds like you
Exactly.
guys already kind of did
No,
the step you needed to there, because you
no,
overthrew the less
I'm
progressive
asking.
government.
I'm asking. Is it the only option we have, or should we take more time and see what the government does, and
Eunice is
then
committed
wait?
to elections in late 25, early 26. I would say, unless you have a good reason to believe that that's a lie now, I'd get to the elections and do what you can in the meantime to
Okay.
support other people and again try to see if you can support the infrastructure of that election. But again, like I'm giving you my from America very basic. I was more familiar with Bangladesh a few years ago and what was going on over there. Was
Yeah.
surprised I hadn't even heard about this revolutionary protest thing until literally now. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
from what I can tell, unless there's crazy information we're missing, get to the elections, man.
Yes. Yeah. Matt was with us a few months ago, and back then it wasn't that bad when Matt was with us, and and since then a lot of things happen. And right now I would like to get this out so people know what we're going through, and if it's possible, you guys, I want your moral support so we can pull
For
this
sure.
through. Yeah.
You have our
Thank you
moral
so
support.
much.
Bangladesh is part of enough international
Thanks, Mark.
organizations that are going to hold them to it too. So there's that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
All
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much.
much, Mark.
Thanks,
Take
Mark.
care.
Thank you. Bye.
We had a caller that was an atheist, but was trying to maybe they're being rescreened. So I'll hold off on that. We'll just go ahead and take what we got here. So Jake is calling from Washington. Jake's pronouns are he, him, and says the Bible doesn't need to be inerrant to be true. Jake, did either of us ever say or think that the Bible had to be inerrant to be true? Oh, Jake's on the web interface. So if you're on your phone, you'll have to tap your phone to wake it up and then tap the browser window again to wake it up to let it know you want to talk. But I've never said nor thought that the Bible was inerrant or that it needed to be inerrant to be true. I fully accept that there could be true things surrounded by errors, but the only issue is, how do you tell which parts are true?
All right. Well,
We
Jake dropped.
Jake ran away too. So wild. It's like the web interface not only spawns more obvious trolls and prank calls, but also more people who can't figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I think from the
So
US, we might be switching to a system soon where if you call in from the US, you are going to be required to just call us back on a phone or give us
this
a number
is
to call you
another
back on.
call. Occasionally we get people to call in and it's like, oh, I would have never thought that. Like, oh, the Bible doesn't need to be inerrant to be true. Well, I never thought it did. But I think the parts of it that are true need to be inerrant because truth can't be in error. But Sarah is calling from the UK. Sarah's pronouns she, her, says she goes to church but doesn't believe that God requires it of us. Okay. I didn't believe that God required me to go to church even when I was a Southern Baptist, but it was a good observance and built community. But so why do you go to church, Sarah?
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's a little quiet.
Oh, sorry. I'll try and be a little close to the phone. Yes. I mean, for me, it's mostly about community and just the feeling of being there. The music is very important. We have our church is it's also very quite Victorian music, and it's the anthems and so on. There's the atmosphere. It's quite an old church. We've got an 11th century font and so on. So it's
Do you
really
think
that sense of
so? For example, I worship Chapel Roan. Let's just say, Chapel Roan is nearly godlike, and her new album is like a religious experience, or as close as I'm going to get. So when I sit down and listen to that album, is that the same as when you go to church to hear? It's just like going to a concert and it's your favorite concert.
I think, I mean, there's definitely non-religious music that has a very strong effect on me. I think something like, but there's something, and I realize this isn't a useful, there's a quality about something like Allegri's Miserere, or, you know, that is just different in a way that feels, I can't really explain it, but it may just be that it's what I grew up with, that it's something that's been instilled in me for a long time, but it's that sort of something else that's there.
So does it matter to you if your beliefs about this are true, or is it just enough that you enjoy it?
Oh, sorry, do you mind repeating?
Do you care if your religious beliefs are true, or is it just enough that you find them comforting or pleasant?
I mean, I definitely do find them comforting, but it's also, I think for me, there is a sense of truth. I mean, I have my own reasons for believing, but I think there's merit in something like the Franciscan approach of not really, not having an established a space of that sort. And I think in some ways, the early Christian, before it became instituted in the Roman Empire, that sort of much more, I suppose, as a much smaller thing, that feels more true in some ways.
So I'm really having a difficult time because I was asking whether or not you cared, whether it was more important to you that it was true or that it was comforting, and you seem to have this really fuzzy concept of truth that is like truthiness. Like, is there actually a God? Are you convinced that there's actually a God, and how much does that matter? Like the accuracy of it?
I experience there being a God, but I don't think it's something that I can. I think my own route to that sense is not something that I can demonstrate to anybody else. It's more. I mean, there are certain things that you would probably find somewhat silly about the reasons why I believe. And I certainly don't believe in all of the sort of the creationist sort of things that I feel that a lot of those sorts of justifications are not, firstly, they're not helpful, but also if it was the case that a God could be proven in that way, and that somebody with sufficient academic ability could access that, it feels like that would be setting up a sort of a standard such that belief would be contingent on one's intelligence or learning, which feels wrong. I don't think that would be the way that God would want people to come to him.
Okay, so you have particular thoughts about what God would or wouldn't want. I'm curious as to how you know it's true, but how do you know you've experienced God? How do you tell?
I suppose the first thing. So I I find there's a sort of a connection for me with the medieval mystics, Julian of Norwich and so on. That sort of feeling of being, of living part of what was there, of having visions and so on. I wouldn't say I have visions in the sense of, seeing scenes specifically. It's much more feelings. But there is also, the first thing, when I was young, I used to sing in the
Sarah,
local
I'm
church
sorry.
choir. Oh,
Sarah,
sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm wondering, let's say you have some experience and you say, that was me experiencing God. I'm asking, how do you know that was you experiencing God versus just an experience, just your own subconscious, just your own whatever, or some other force? And you said it's a feeling of being, of living versus what was there, having visions, but then you went on to say you don't have visions, you have feelings. Let's just assume that you have a feeling of being. Why is a feeling of being confirmation that you are experiencing God?
Sarah, you may need to wake up your phone. You're totally silent.
Yeah, your phone may have timed out because we're not hearing you.
Sorry, am I back?
Yes, you are back. How do you tell that this
Sorry.
feeling of being is you experiencing God?
I think there are certain things that for me, those feelings are, they correlate with my understanding of the Christian God. Or at least, and certain aspects of, when I was a child, there was a bishop who we had a sort of a choral festival thing. The bishop was there, and he talked to me, and he put his arms on my back and just by my shoulder blades, and he said, "I can feel them growing." And ever since then, there's been that sort of sense of just a sense of, and I know this is silly, but it's like angel wings, the sense of having, of being, the potentiality of the angelic. And I
Sarah,
think
there is
Yes.
nothing, I don't know what this bishop did, but there's nothing remotely biblical about you ever becoming or being an angel or having wings. Humans and angels are distinct creations of God according to the Bible. But when I asked how you could tell that your feeling, was confirmation of God, you just said that, first of all, you said things for you, and truth isn't just for you. There's either a God or there's not. It's not just true for you. But then you went on to say that it's consistent with your understanding of the Christian God. How do you know that the understanding of the Christian God that you have, which you are using as a measuring stick to gauge your experience, how do you know that that understanding is correct?
I suppose, yes, there are a lot of assumptions there. Some of the sense of infinite mercy and such like are things that could apply to a number of other gods potentially as well. So some of those senses, I admit I could be, that there's the possibility it could be a different God, but it's
What's your take on the Bible then? Because I don't know of any other source of information about the Christian God than the Christian Bible. Do you know of another source of information for that? Because I don't.
I think that sort of direct experience, the sort of the thing that the mystics felt, might be potentially another one, but it's not obviously something that could be shared. It's not something that I can, show you as as evidence. So I'm aware that's not
I've got a couple
helpful.
issues.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, Sarah, you've said a couple of things, and I think I recognize your belief pattern, and I'm going to try to nail it down here. So I'm going to put it a little bit abruptly, and it may be one that you are hesitant to agree with, but it's what I hear. What I hear essentially is you have had it described to you, essentially by others, what the feeling of God is like. Then you had those feelings, and you remembered that you were told that those feelings are God, so you've attributed them to God with no actual investigation for whether or not where you received that information, these people that you're saying like the mystics and stuff, whether or not they actually had a factual basis for telling you that that's how things were. Is that somewhat true? Because that is where a lot of my own Mormonism and my feelings of the Holy Spirit came from. I was told what the Holy Spirit felt like and didn't find out until after I left religion that those feelings I were told were the Holy Ghost, that not only could I experience them, I could experience those same feelings when doing things antithetical to what I was explained to have told were godly things to do. So the question is that correct? You were told what God feels like, you felt those things, so you attribute those feelings to God. Is that correct?
I have to admit that is accurate to my experience, yes.
Good. Then the other thing I heard that really stuck out as tremendously alarming was you were describing these feelings you were having, these things that are affirming, that are coming from God, and you seem to offer as the only alternative possibility that, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was still experiencing God, but a different God. It could be a different God making me have those feelings. And then you seem to repeat that in the case of the mystics as well. Perhaps they were getting it from somebody else. Why is that the dichotomy? Why is the option that this feeling is only a God feeling? So if it's not your God, it has to be a different one. When have you ever considered the other alternative, which is that there is no God and that these feelings are coming from something totally naturally based? Or not even that there's no God, just that the feelings don't come from a God.
I mean, I suppose it's a little bit like what I was saying with the music, that there are certain types of music that I can experience, secular music, I can experience and have a strong emotional reaction, but there's something different about the emotional reaction that I have for...
Sarah, I agree with you. There is something different. And it sounds like that you are, I'm not going to guess your age, but I think you're over 30 years old. So I'm going to go with maybe the thing that is different is decades of priming. Just in the same way that I now actually use playing Tetris as a method of emotional regulation and recovery from traumatic experiences from my past. So I probably have a different experience of Tetris and maybe even have a relaxed or a peaceful response compared to a person who has been primed to be very competitive at Tetris. Or as Matt mentioned, he has what feels like a religious experience when he listens to this musician who he thinks for his music taste is godlike. And I'm going to get roasted for admitting this. I think she's just fine. So it sounds like Matt and I are having the different sides that you're saying you're having. With secular music, you have one experience. With religious, you have another because your experience is different. Much like with Chapel Roan, Matt has a nearly religious experience. And I go, yeah, this is okay.
Because Jimmy's wrong, but I'm just joking. I'm sorry.
He can't factually back that up as well.
Sarah, I think the thing is, and I appreciate your honesty, and I genuinely, I love and appreciate your answer here, because what we're constantly trying to do is have conversations about why people believe. If you had a good reason for believing, and you may think that your reason is good, but certainly I think you would agree. Well, I say certainly, I shouldn't. I think you would agree that your reasons should not convince Jimmy or me, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I'm aware that there's no empirical possibility for you to be able to access. And I agree with Jimmy that it is possible that, yes, there isn't necessarily a sign of a God there, that I don't have that definite knowledge. But
so if you're enjoying this, if you're enjoying, the and by the way, I don't think I've been to England many times, but I don't think, and I've been to the UK, but I don't think I've ever been to a church there. So I'm not necessarily sure what, is it C of E or whatever, it doesn't matter. If this is about enjoyment, what's your take on the Bible and what it flatly says about slaves, about women, about sexuality, about all of these things? Do you just shrug some of that off in order to be a better person than the book at a literal level would be? Or are you in agreement? Do you think, slavery is or was fine and that women should not be allowed to speak in church or own property or any number of things?
I don't agree with those things, no.
So would it be fair? I apologize, Sarah. Would it be, because we're potentially running short on time, would it be fair to say that you have a version of the Christian God that is less tied to the Bible and less tied to the Christian tradition than it is to a Christian flavoring of mystical interest that you developed over the years?
I think that's accurate, yes.
Awesome. I mean, not awesome, because I think you still believe something that you probably don't have good reason to believe, but I think you're probably a better person and better off not being in any way tempted to go down the literalist fundamentalist route. Sorry. But
yeah,
I think what you might, to whatever extent you might care about advice, and you may not. My questions, the only thing I care about is whether or not it's true. I don't care if I find it appealing or good. Like, I love Chapel Roan's music, but if it turns out she turns into just be a terrible human being, okay, I will no longer be a fan. And so when I was a Christian, I thought it was God loves, Jesus saves, it makes a better world, it's all true and it's essential. And then when I found out that none of it had good reason, none of it had good evidence, and the things in the Bible and throughout the history of the religion were incredibly awful, it made me wonder, if the God I believe in, that is about love, exists, why hasn't he shown up to correct all the misinformation and things done in his name? And if it's really just about love and feeling good and listening to music that you like, why isn't that what the holy books say? You seem to value this connection with something ephemeral, ill-defined, and that may not even be real. And so it seems like there's a difference between orthodoxy, which is about doing what the words say, and orthopraxy, which is about the practices that you do. And it seems that you have come up with your own orthopraxy, that is, be a good person, enjoy the music, try to get in touch with whatever's out there, and maybe don't make judgments on people. And I'd say that's a pretty good, version of how to live life, with the exception that I wouldn't need to put it in the context of a church. It's probably closer to humanism than many theists I talk to, if those are accurate models of what you're thinking.
Yes. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for the humanist position as well. I'm certainly not of the opinion that one has to be a believer to be a good person or anything of that sort. I think that's a reasonable assessment.
Well, on that note, Sarah, because if you're not going to have any way to demonstrate that what you believe is true and what we primarily care about is true, then I think we're kind of largely in agreement on where you're at. If you have some closing thoughts, I'm happy for you to give them. And I've been invited to debate at Oxford Union, so if I make it over there and you're within traveling distance to come down to Oxford Union. I'd love to say hi to you sometime,
Oh,
but
I'm
I'll give you
within.
your.
I'm within
just gonna
walking
say,
distance.
oh, you are? Well, then
Yeah.
it would be a shame. Keep note, and I will announce if this thing comes to fruition. I was supposed to do it in 2020, but COVID sidelined it, and they reached out to me again recently, but I haven't heard back, and I've got to wait for some passport stuff. But I want to give you a chance to get a last word in on your thoughts on this before we move on to the final caller for today.
No, I appreciate your thoughts and perspective. I recognize that there is something, it's not what would be called rational about my belief. It's I'm aware that it's something that gives me a lot of comfort. Yeah, I will think about what you've said, certainly.
Well, genuinely, Sarah, I appreciate the call. I appreciate the thought and the honesty. It's rare that we get someone willing to open up. And by the way, if you never change your mind, or if you find better reasons, or whatever, if you find better reasons that should convince us, we're always here, eager to hear it. But I just appreciate the call overall. And hopefully, if I do get to go back over and do a debate at Oxford Union, maybe we'll get a chance to say hello.
Yes, of course. Thank you both.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Jimmy Snow.
What's up? The Line is a podcast.
I mean, Jimmy Snow has a podcast. The Line has a podcast. Why don't I have a podcast?
Bro, whenever you want a podcast, you just let me know.
Okay, y'all heard him? Jimmy Snow is going to make me a podcast.
It'll be called Matt Dillahunty has a podcast, for the record.
It's
That's
true.
literally, we're taking the has a podcast thing and running with it.
I have you've been busy this weekend. I had another idea that I'm going to run by you, not now and not
Sure.
immediately after the show, but just remind me that there was something else along the lines of the email that we got.
Oh, yeah. I read the email on, I read it on the bonus show for the next episode of the podcast comes out tomorrow morning. The Line is a podcast. We'll be talking about all kinds of news stuff and Elon's new far right updates, because he thought that hand signal wasn't enough. He went ahead and decided to address some far right people in Germany and just make people really wonder what's going on. But anyway, we'll be talking about all kinds of stuff tomorrow morning.
Did you see?
But on the
did you say
bonus
that
show
they
for
projected
patrons.
that picture? Did you say that they projected that picture of his salute-esque thing on the sidewall of the Berlin Tesla factory, and it just said Heil Tesla?
I did not hear that. That's
in fucking Berlin.
bananas.
Google
That's
it, look it
illegal
up.
in Berlin too. That's wild.
I think it may actually only be legal in Austria, but I'm not sure. Because I don't know. We talked about it a bit in Twitch stream. Our final call for today is from Oregon, pronouns to him. Doe, thanks so much for waiting. You're looking for some advice on your deconversion. How can we help?
I can't believe I'm actually on your show. I love you guys.
Can't either.
I can't believe a lot of things, hence the show.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling in about. Believe in a lot of things.
Sweet.
So I'm not sure if it's a good thing that I came right after the woman that was just talking about trying to figure it out. Maybe it's a good, maybe it's a bad thing. As I wasn't really expecting to get on your show today, so I started writing some notes while I was listening. Can I give you the basics of what I'm calling in about?
Sure.
Okay, so my parents became newborn Christians when I was 14 and forced me to go to church, and so I kind of bit into it. And I never really believed in the miracles. They sent me to a Christian retreat when I was 15, where I had an experience where I felt the Holy Spirit and spoke in tongues and all that stuff. And so that made me a believer. I'm kind of reading down through my little note thing. Anyway, so
Yeah, we're listening.
So,
we need to get to the points, but yeah, we're listening.
well, my ultimate point is I'm looking for advice on how to get rid of this belief that I have in God, because I know it doesn't make any sense, but I still want there to be one.
You want there to be a God?
Yeah, wouldn't it be cool?
No.
Well, not the Christian God, because that guy's a dick. I read the Bible cover to cover, and that's what made me stop being a Christian.
Well, what God would be cool? Because the kind of God that one might want to exist definitely doesn't, because the only God I could imagine wanting to exist is one that already interacts with human beings rather than making us try to figure it out ourselves.
That's a good point.
I'm aware.
I think most people who are saying they want there to be a God, and Doug, sorry, is it Doug or is it Doe? Did we make a mistake here?
Douglas.
Doug. Okay, so I think we can get rid of that H. Anyway, Doug, I think when people are saying they wish there was a God, I think that they're probably actually trying to say, I wish there was an afterlife. I want that afterlife to be positive. I want it to make up. I want someone to have paid attention to what happened to me in my life and think I'm going to make up for it in the afterlife. And that has more to do with, are you wanting a God because you want to live forever and you want an afterlife? Or are you wanting a God because you just want a simple answer to the question, like, where did everything come from? And a 3-letter answer seems easier, even if it adds complexities.
The best answer I can come up with for you is that I'm not looking for an excuse, and I'm not looking for a reward.
But are you looking for an afterlife?
When
is
you
that
say
the thing you wish
there was a God, why?
Kind of like when you guys say being good is like good enough for itself or something like that. I mean, you never said that, but the idea of being good just to be good is good enough for me. But
yeah, I'm
for
fine.
Some reason,
I'm fine with the notion of being good and doing good things being its own reward. You said it would be cool if there was a God, or you wish there was a God, and I'm trying to figure out, why do you wish there's a God? What would be different about the world that would make it be good for there to be a God?
That's what I should have asked myself. And I will ask myself that. Can you repeat that,
All
please?
right, Doug.
I don't understand how anybody can say, I wish there was a God, and not be able to say why they wish there was a God.
I think I got it, but you wouldn't say it earlier, Doug. Doug,
I do too.
Just very simply, do you wish that there was an afterlife?
It depends on what it would be like.
Doug, any afterlife you want it to be is the thing that you are scared of losing. If you stop believing in God, is the thing that you are afraid of, is ultimately having to come to terms with the termination of your existence at the end of your brain's life.
You know, that could be very true. And I don't like it.
Okay. Doug, do you know how long... Okay, I'm not going to... We're short on time, so I'm just going to go round about it. You shouldn't like the idea of dying. 4.5 billion years of creatures trying to stay alive. There's no reason why you should like the idea of dying. But if you live in denial of the fact that you will one day die, you may forget to live. And that's why you should address it anyway. Because if you live in denial of your ultimate reality, you may pass up opportunities, and you may not really experience until it is too late just how short life is.
Yeah, I understood everything you said, but I think you didn't understand when I said that just because I think it'd be cool that I could live after life isn't why I'm doing it. It's not why I want there to be a God.
Okay, so let's go back to your original question then. It's so convoluted.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
why
yeah.
do you want there to be God if not an afterlife?
What I am trying to say is confusing, because I'm confused myself. which hinders everything, right? I think it would be cool if somehow, some way, we did have a soul, and then when we die, we all go into one conglomerate goodness. I mean, I'm not saying that's what I believe. That's just what I like to think.
Okay.
Sure. The thing I proposed 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I don't care. See, I don't base my
Okay.
beliefs on what I'd like to believe or what I wish were true, and I don't recommend that. And also, the purpose of the show isn't call in and tell us what you wish were true. So if you're looking for advice, if you're looking for advice in your deconversion, when we ask the questions, we shouldn't have to go 5 rounds to get you to say, oh, I think it'd be cool if there was a soul. Well, neato. I only care about what's keeping you from, you know, either accepting or rejecting some God concept. You're saying you're looking for your advice in your deconversion. My advice is care more about whether things are true than whether they're cool or feel good. There's my advice.
Yeah, Doug, I'll go back to the first question you asked and give you advice on that, which is basically what the advice for letting go of these beliefs are, how do you put them down? Go to recoveringfromreligion.org and find a local community. As you find yourself exposed to more people who also feel that way, but they have a different belief background than you, it will be more obvious to you that they should put their beliefs down, and you might start to internalize that for yourself. So when you feel that way of like, wow, this guy who used to be a Muslim, even though they believe all these crazy things, he's having a hard time putting it down too, even though it seems so silly to me. And then you realize, and that's how mine must look to him. You may have, but in general, community is usually the answer to most of society's problems anyway. Unfortunately, we tend to weaponize communities and make bigger problems.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep. Thanks for the call, Doug. Appreciate it. Best of luck, and definitely reach out to Recovering from Religion. And if you come up with other questions or things, where you need guidance, feel free to call them back another time. But, telling me what you wish were true is only interesting if we were starting to date, and I'm already taken.
Also, Doug, the line as a podcast.
Yes, also the line as a podcast. Thanks so much, Doug. Or Dope.
Thanks, Doug.
I think there was a typo in there that turned Doug into Duggage.
You know what
Jimmy,
I was just thinking of?
I'm sure that you have thoughts and announcements, so I'll just shut up.
I actually want to ask you a question. I don't know if I should do this on air, if it's a good idea or not, but I'm wondering, is this a good idea? We get so many people who call, but also one of the things I've noticed is we get a lot of people who email us who are like, hey, we know you do that show, but could you answer this question? I wonder if there's an organization, or if even Recovering from Religion, that we could say we trust, where we could create a resource that's attached to ours, since people are here, and we could say, all right, if you have questions about this or whatever, email atheist@qnaline.com, because we have our Q&A line thing. And that inbox, since we don't have the time to do it, is actually monitored by an organization like RFR that has the time to do it, and we trust to do it, and does it anyway. I'm wondering if, as we're hitting more calls like these, and seriously, the number of emails that just have to go unanswered because people mistake it for a helpline, I'm wondering if we should try and figure something else out like that.
When I first got started with this, I created a website called ironchariots.org, and it was essentially a counter-apologetics wiki. It has since shut down, although there's an archive of it somewhere, because I turned it over to somebody and they turned it over to somebody. And, now countless hours that I spent writing stuff up was there. It was basically a way of having an atheist response to apologetics that would also serve as an FAQ. I'm wondering if it might just be better for us as the line over time to create some FAQ responses of blurbs, and then post it on our website. Kind of like one of my favorite websites is the Index. If you Google Index to Creationist Claims, you will find it's talkorigins.org/indexcc/list.html. That is a list, categorized, detailed list of not every, because there's some that haven't been covered yet, but the overwhelming majority of claims and categories that creationists use, with actual indexed, resourced responses. I'm wondering if maybe just doing an FAQ of, hey, what does atheist mean to you? Or, hey, where do you guys get your morals from? Or, hey, why isn't this good enough evidence? Why isn't my personal experience good enough? And you know, little things like that, that might be, that way when people email, instead of just not getting an answer or having one of us type up an answer we've typed up 53 times, maybe we take the answers we've typed up 53 times and make an FAQ to direct them to. I don't know.
Be cool if we could also get an AI involved that can recognize what they're probably asking about and direct them to those resources. And in other words, be able to have the responses handled by, because that's still having somebody respond on purpose and stuff. It's interesting. There's lots of stuff to consider there. That would be the thing that I'd be the most excited for AI to handle, is expanding resource-based stuff. Like when people, I know there's a lot of controversy over AI, but let me tell you how much AI has done more for expanding my therapy in the last year than I probably got in the decade prior. There's a lot of things that AI will be excellent for, especially for people who don't have access to. Not to say that AI should replace therapy. It definitely shouldn't. However, it can supplement it. And let's go with the reality of being in America. You probably can't get therapy. Most people watching right now can't get it even if you want it. And yet, for 95% of things, ChatGPT can give you excellent resources for how to handle anxiety, how to handle trauma, how to handle, like it is very good. And it can also emulate its talking function. It can emulate a therapist as far as just having someone to talk through and go through the right things. And so AI is an excellent therapeutic supplementary tool and will eventually be a total therapy substitute, to tell you the truth. And will have a much less, I've probably tried 15 therapists in my life, and at least 10 of them were bad. 3 of them, like really bad, like tried to get their religion on me. And it will eliminate that margin of error also. Even if there are mistakes made, it will be far less mistakes. So anyway, interesting stuff.
On that note,
I went on that side note.
In addition to recovering from religion, I also want to make sure we remind people about seculartherapy.org. And I'll do a quick rundown of the shows here on the Line Network in the coming week. And that is, we're about to wrap up the show here in just a minute. A huge thank you to our call screener and to Arden and to our moderators and everybody, and to Jimmy for jumping in, and for John for being here earlier. At 7 p.m. Central, which is just less than 2 hours from now, Forrest Valkai and Seth Andrews will be on to do the Sunday show after dark. So you have time to go get a dinner, and or whatever you need to do in the in-between time. Tomorrow is an episode of Skeptalk at 6 p.m. Central with Dr. Darren Adair and Eric Gibbon. Hooray. I mean, it probably won't run 9 hours because Forrest isn't there, but it should run just long enough to be really awesome. Tuesday's Chewed Gum starts at 6 p.m. Central, right here on the same network with Alyssa and Promise. My
co-host at The Line has a podcast.
Sorry, what?
I said my co-host at The Line has a podcast. I'm paying myself $1 every time I mention it.
Well,
Promise, okay. Matt. Promise is the co-host.
Promise analyst.
Yes, I'm aware. I was just in mid-sentence and we was getting ready to mention Promise again, and had already been corrected earlier when I said Eve. So on Wednesdays, the Hang Up with me and Promise, who, by the way, is the co-host of The Line Has a Podcast.
That's true too.
See, I'm really bad at announcing stuff like that. And so Jimmy's used to me being bad. So even before I get a chance to be bad, he's got to jump in to make sure that I'm not going to be bad, because I suck.
Sometimes I sometimes just jump in because I'm kind of a jumper inner.
That's true. You are a jumper inner, but we like, and you jumped in today. So
that's right.
Quick notes for everybody watching the show. I gave you the list of shows that are coming up. Please make sure you tune in, but also like, subscribe, and share. If you want to support the channel financially so that we can stay in healthcare and we can pay for the phone calls, especially the good phone calls, the people like Sarah, where we can have, a conversation and maybe come to a better understanding of why someone believes, and the fact that they understand that their reason for belief shouldn't be good enough for any of us. That's the type of stuff that we like to do here on the network. We break the shows up into different topics. Sunday tends to be about religion. All of the shows can be about religion. They can be about politics. It can be about whatever, because the Line is a caller-driven network. and you guys call in and set the tone and the pace for what we're actually going to engage on. We want more conversations. We want more theist calls. And if you're a theist and you did not get through today, you have another opportunity in less than 2 hours to call in, speak to two completely different people about what's going on with you, what you can demonstrate, and what you can't. Any last notes to put a button on today, Jimmy?
Look out for Matt Dillahunty as a podcast. But in the meantime, all of the things he just said about Patreon are great. But did you know that the Patreon is also the same Patreon for The Line has a podcast? So you'll also get the ad-free version and with the extended and bonus episode. You don't have to have a second one. So also, I think the chat's going into horny jail because I have gotten hit on more in this episode. All it took was losing 75 pounds than ever before. Anyway, horny jail for all of you. The Line is a podcast.
That's the horny stuff. Because I love you, babe. That's why they're all horny.
I'm realizing
just
now
haven't seen you enough.
We could have added a super chat goal. I took off my jacket earlier for free. I could have made it a super chat goal.
Okay. We should also get